The wind that night didn't howl. It screamed. Elias Mercer stood in the doorway of his ranch house watching the snowstorm devour the valley, and he felt nothing. 4 winters had passed since the fever took his wife and daughter, and in that time he'd perfected the art of not feeling. He worked the ranch because stopping meant thinking. He fixed fences because idle hands remembered what they used to hold. He rode the empty hills because motion felt less like dying than sitting still. The ranch itself had become a monument to absence. Sarah's dresses still hung in the bedroom closet. Little Emma's drawings were pinned to the kitchen wall, faded now, curling at the edges. Elias hadn't moved them, hadn't touched them. He lived around these artifacts like a museum curator in his own mausoleum, preserving everything except the will to keep living. He was 43 years old and felt ancient. The storm had been building since noon, and by evening the sky had turned the color of old bruises. Elias should have stayed inside, should have bolted the door, stoked the fire, and let the weather do whatever the hell it wanted. But sometime around dusk he heard it, faint, almost swallowed by the wind, but there, a scream, high-pitched, desperate, human, coming from the direction of the old Grady mining barn up on the northern ridge. Elias stood in the doorway for a full minute, his hand on the frame, his breath fogging in the cold. Every instinct told him to ignore it. The Grady place had been abandoned for years. Could have been an animal, could have been the wind playing tricks, could have been 100 things that weren't his problem. He grabbed his coat anyway. The ride up the ridge was brutal. Snow came at him sideways, stinging his face, piling up so fast his horse struggled for footing. Visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet. Twice he almost turned back, but that scream kept replaying in his head, and some stubborn part of him, the part that used to be a cavalry scout, the part that used to give a damn, wouldn't let him quit. By the time he reached the barn, his hands were numb, and his face felt like raw meat. The structure loomed out of the whiteness, half collapsed, its roof sagging under the weight of accumulated snow. The main door hung crooked on broken hinges, banging in the wind. Elias dismounted, his boots crunching through the drifts, and approached slowly. He heard voices inside, children's voices. He pushed the door open. The scene that greeted him didn't make sense at first. His brain refused to process it. 6 kids, ranging in age from maybe 5 to 13, huddled together in the corner of the barn like a litter of feral animals. They were filthy, dressed in rags that might have once been clothing. Their faces were hollow, eyes too large, skin stretched tight over bone. Frostbite blackened several sets of fingers. The smallest one, a boy who couldn't have been more than 5, was coughing wetly into a scrap of cloth. And standing in front of them, blocking Elias from getting any closer, was a little girl holding a knife. She couldn't have been more than 7. Blonde hair matted with dirt and blood, thin arms shaking with cold and exhaustion. But the knife was steady, pointed right at Elias's chest, and her eyes burned with a ferocity that belonged on someone 3 times her age. "Get back," she said. Her voice cracked, but didn't waver. "You ain't taking us." Elias raised his hand slowly, showing empty palms. "Easy now." "I'll cut you." The girl's jaw clenched. "I swear I will." "I believe you." Elias didn't move closer. "But if you stab me, you're stuck in this barn with a corpse and a storm that's about to bury you alive. So maybe we talk first." The girl's eyes narrowed. Behind her, the other children pressed closer together, watching Elias like he was a snake that might strike any second. One of the older boys, tall, maybe 12 or 13, with a swollen eye and dried blood crusted under his nose, shifted his weight, ready to fight or run. "Who are you?" the little girl demanded. "Name's Elias Mercer. I own the ranch about 3 miles south of here. Heard someone screaming." "We didn't scream."
"Well, somebody did. Otherwise I'd be home right now instead of freezing my ass off in this barn." The girl's grip on the knife tightened. "You with Voss?" The name hit Elias like a slap. Gideon Voss. Everyone in the territory knew that name. Mine owner, land speculator, the kind of rich bastard who bought judges and sheriffs like other men bought cattle. Elias had never met him personally, but he knew the type. Power without conscience, money without mercy. "I'm not with anybody," Elias said carefully. "Especially not Voss." "What's he got to do with this?" The girl's face flickered, just for a second, with something that looked like hope trying not to get crushed. "You really don't know?" "Know what?" The older boy spoke up then,
his voice rough and defensive. The mines, up past White Rock Canyon, Voss runs them. Uses kids to work the tunnels because we're small enough to fit places grown men can't. Elias felt something cold settle in his gut. Child labor. Labor. The boy laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. That's a nice word for it. Slavery's closer. Kidnapping, murder, take your pick. We escaped 2 days ago, the little girl added, still holding the knife. Been hiding ever since, but Voss's men are looking for us. They always come looking. Elias glanced around the barn. These kids were dying. Maybe not in the next hour, but soon. The smallest one's cough had a rattle that sounded like drowning. Frostbite that bad could turn to gangrene, and if Voss really was hunting them, this barn was a death trap. How many are after you? The older boy shrugged. Don't know. Enough? Voss never lets anyone go, not alive. You kill anybody getting out? The question hung in the frozen air. The boy's face went hard. Yeah, I did.
One of Voss's men? A guard. He was... The boy's jaw worked. He was hurting Iris, the little one with the black hair. So I grabbed a rock and I hit him until he stopped moving. Elias studied the kid. 13 years old, maybe less, and already carrying that look. The look of someone who'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Elias had seen it before, in soldiers during the war. In himself sometimes, when he looked in the mirror too long. What's your name, son? Noah Reed.
All right, Noah. Here's the situation. That storm outside is going to kill you if you stay here. And if Voss's men find you first, they'll kill you anyway. So you got two choices. You can trust me and come back to my ranch, or you can take your chances alone. Why would you help us? The little girl's voice was sharp with suspicion. Nobody helps for free. You're right. Nobody does. Elias lowered his hand slowly. But I got a ranch with 4 walls, a roof that doesn't leak, and enough food that you won't starve tonight. Past that, I don't know, but it's better odds than this barn. The children looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them, months or years of survival language that Elias couldn't read. Finally, the little girl lowered the knife. My name's Clara, she said quietly. Clara Vale. And when she looked up at him, Elias felt his heart stop. She had Emma's eyes. Not the same color. Emma's had been brown, Clara's were blue, but the same shape, the same fierce stubbornness, the same way of looking at the world like it owed her nothing and she'd fight for everything anyway. Elias swallowed hard. All right, Clara, let's get you out of here before we all freeze to death. Getting 6 half-frozen children through a blizzard on horseback wasn't logistically possible, but Elias made it work because the alternative was watching them die. He put the smallest ones, Milo and Eve, on his horse, wrapped them in his coat, and led the animal on foot. Noah and Clara walked behind him, each carrying one of the other girls. The snow was so thick, Elias navigated mostly by instinct and luck. The trip should have taken 30 minutes. It took 2 hours. By the time the ranch house appeared through the white curtain of snow, Elias's hands and feet had gone numb, and his face felt like cracked leather. He kicked the door open, herded the kids inside, and immediately started working. Fire first. He got the hearth roaring while the children stood in a shivering cluster near the doorway, too shocked or scared to move deeper into the house. Sit, Elias ordered, pointing at the floor in front of the fireplace. All of you, now! They obeyed mechanically, collapsing in a heap like puppets with cut strings. Elias grabbed every blanket he could find and piled them on top of the kids until they disappeared under layers of wool and quilts. Then he went to the kitchen and started pulling out food, bread, dried meat, a pot of stew he'd made 2 days ago and hadn't bothered eating. He heated the stew, poured it into bowls, and carried them over. Eat slow, he warned. Your stomachs aren't used to food. You eat too fast, you'll just throw it up. They ate like starving animals anyway, hands shaking so badly they could barely hold the spoons. Milo, the little boy with the rattling cough, got halfway through his bowl before he started crying, tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on his face. It's okay, Clara whispered, pulling him close. You're okay now. But she didn't believe it. Elias could see it in her eyes. She expected this to be temporary, expected the door to burst open any second, expected betrayal. Elias sat down across from them, suddenly exhausted. His wet clothes clung to his skin, his boots squelched with melted snow. He should have changed, should have taken care of himself first, but he couldn't seem to move. "So," he said finally, "somebody want to tell me what the hell is actually going on?" Noah looked up from his bowl. "You really don't know about the mines?" "I know Voss owns half the mountain. I know he's rich and connected. Past that, no." "There's tunnels up past White Rock," Noah said quietly. "Deep ones. Goes down maybe 100 feet or more. They're mining gold, silver, whatever they can pull out. But the veins are narrow. Too narrow for grown men. So Voss uses kids." "How many kids?" Noah shrugged. "Dozens, maybe. Hard to say. They keep us separated. Move us around. But I've seen at least 30 myself, and I've only been there 6 months." "6 months?" Elias felt sick. "How'd you end up there?" "My parents died last year, cholera. Had some debts they couldn't pay. Voss showed up at the orphanage with papers saying he'd bought the debt. So now I belong to him. Legal and everything." "That's not legal." "It is if you own the judge." Noah's voice was flat, matter of fact. "Voss has paperwork for all of us, contracts, debt transfers, even a couple of apprenticeship agreements from parents who didn't realize they were selling their kids into slavery." Elias looked at the other children. "All of you?" Clara nodded. "My mama tried to fight it. She said no when Voss came to take me. So they—" Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard and tried again. "They killed her, shot her right in front of me, told me if I didn't cooperate, they'd do worse." The little girl with black hair, Iris, Noah had called her, made a soft sound and pressed closer to Clara. She hadn't said a single word since Elias found them. "That's Iris," Clara explained. "She doesn't talk anymore. Not since the tunnels. And that's Lena." Clara pointed at a girl maybe 8 years old with bright, frightened eyes. "And that's Eve." The smallest girl besides Milo, maybe 6, with tangled red hair and a face covered in bruises. "Milo's sick," Clara continued, her hand resting protectively on the little boy's shoulder. "Real sick. He needs medicine or he's going to die." "I know." Elias had already noticed the blood in Milo's cough, the way his breathing rattled and wheezed. Probably pneumonia, maybe worse. "We'll deal with that tomorrow. Tonight, you rest." "Why are you doing this?" Clara asked suddenly. "Helping us." It was the same question she'd asked in the barn, but this time it sounded different. Less suspicious, more desperate, like she needed there to be a reason, a justification, something that made sense in a world that had stopped making sense a long time ago. Elias didn't have a good answer. He looked at these 6 broken kids sitting in his house, wrapped in his blankets, eating his food, and he thought about Emma, about Sarah, about the family he'd buried 4 years ago and spent every day since trying to forget. "I don't know," he said finally, "but you're here now, so we'll figure it out." That first night, none of them slept much. Elias gave the kids his bedroom. All 6 of them piled into the bed and onto the floor like a litter of puppies seeking warmth. He took the chair by the fire and sat with his rifle across his lap, watching the door, listening to the wind howl outside. Every creak made him tense. Every shadow felt like danger. Around midnight, he heard footsteps. Soft, hesitant. Noah appeared in the doorway, his face pale in the firelight. "Can't sleep?" Elias asked. Noah shook his head and sat down on the floor near the hearth. For a while, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the windows. Snow piled higher against the walls. "You think they'll come for us?" Noah asked finally. "Yeah, I think they will." "What'll you do?" "Honestly, I don't know yet." Elias leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "But I'm not handing you back, that's for damn sure." Noah stared into the fire. "I killed a man." "You said it doesn't bother you? Should it?" "Most folks would say killing's wrong, no matter what." Elias was quiet for a moment. "Most folks haven't watched a child get hurt and been the only one close enough to stop it. You did what you had to do. That doesn't make you a murderer, son. Just makes you someone who protected somebody weaker." Noah's shoulders sagged, like he'd been holding his breath for months waiting for someone to say exactly that. "What if Voss kills you?" Noah's voice cracked. "Because of us. Then he kills me. But I've been halfway dead for 4 years anyway. Might as well die for something. They sat in silence for a while longer. Eventually, Noah went back to bed and Elias resumed his vigil by the fire. He thought about what he'd just said. Might as well die for something. Was that what this was? A suicide mission dressed up as charity? He didn't think so. Something about having those kids in the house, something about Clara's fierce protectiveness, Noah's quiet guilt, Milo's rattling cough, had cracked something open inside him, something he thought had died with Emma and Sarah. Purpose. Not happiness, not peace, but purpose. He'd spent 4 years waiting to stop existing. Maybe, just maybe, these kids were the reason to start existing again. The storm raged all night and into the next day. Elias woke stiff and sore from sleeping in the chair. The house was freezing except right near the fire. He built up the flames, started coffee, and began pulling together something resembling breakfast. The kids woke gradually, confused and disoriented. Clara was the first one up, moving quietly through the house like a soldier on patrol. She checked each child, counted heads, made sure everyone was accounted for before she relaxed even a fraction. "You always do that?" Elias asked, handing her a cup of water. "Do what?" "Act like their mother." Clara's face hardened. "Somebody has to." "How old are you? 7? Almost 8? That's too young to be responsible for 5 other kids." "Well, nobody asked me." Clara's voice was sharp. "But if I don't take care of them, nobody will." Elias didn't argue. She was right, and they both knew it. The other kids woke slowly. Eve clung to Clara's leg, silent and watchful. Iris sat in the corner, her eyes tracking every movement Elias made. Lena tried to smile, tried to be cheerful, but fear kept pulling at the edges of her expression. Milo coughed himself awake, weak and shivering despite the fire. Noah helped Elias cook breakfast. Eggs, bacon, bread. Simple food, but more than these kids had seen in months. They ate like it might disappear if they blinked. Afterward, Elias did what he could for Milo. Gave him water, kept him warm, dosed him with the only medicine he had, whiskey mixed with honey, and herbs Sarah used to use for coughs. It wasn't enough. The kid needed a real doctor. But leaving the ranch meant exposure. Meant Voss's men seeing him with 6 escaped child laborers. Meant putting targets on all their backs. "What are we going to do?" Noah asked quietly while the others slept near the fire. "Short term? Survive the storm. Long term?" Elias rubbed his face. "I don't know yet. You can't fight Voss. Nobody can. Maybe. But I can make it damn hard for him to take you back." Over the next 2 days, while the storm finally blew itself out, Elias started preparing. He cleaned and loaded every weapon he owned. He stockpiled ammunition. He boarded up windows and reinforced the doors. He taught Noah and Clara how to shoot. Not well, but enough to make noise and maybe hit something if they got lucky. And slowly, something strange started happening. The kids began to relax. Not completely. They still jumped at loud sounds, still watched the door, still expected disaster. But little things started breaking through. Lena found Emma's old books on a shelf and begged Clara to read to her. Clara, who'd probably never had anyone read to her in her life, stumbled through the words phonetically, and Lena listened like it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever heard. Milo, still sick but slightly better with rest and food, discovered Elias's old harmonica and tried to play it. The sounds he made were terrible, discordant, off-key, painful to listen to, but the kid's face lit up with something like joy, and Elias didn't have the heart to take it away. Noah followed Elias everywhere, desperate to be useful, desperate to prove his worth. He hauled wood, fixed a broken chair leg, helped mend a section of fence that had blown down in the storm. He worked with an intensity that bordered on frantic, like if he stopped moving, he'd disappear. "You don't have to earn your keep," Elias told him after watching the boy work himself to exhaustion. "You're not my employee." "Then what am I?" Elias didn't have an answer for that yet. Iris remained silent, but she started drawing. She found some old charcoal sticks and scraps of paper, and she drew pictures, the ranch, the fire, the other kids. She left them around the house like little offerings, and Elias found himself collecting them, smoothing out the wrinkled edges, keeping them safe. Clara stayed vigilant, always watching, always ready. But even she started to soften. Elias caught her smiling once while Lena told some rambling story about a magic horse. Just for a second. But it was there. And then Lena started calling him Mr. Cowboy. He didn't know where she got it. He didn't even wear a cowboy hat. But she latched onto it like a lifeline, following him around the house, chattering nonstop. Mr. Cowboy, can I help feed the chickens? Mr. Cowboy, why is the sky blue? Mr. Cowboy, do you have a magic horse like in my story? She was exhausting and relentless and completely unfiltered, and Elias found himself genuinely smiling for the first time in 4 years. One morning, about a week after the storm, Lena was helping him make breakfast, mostly getting in the way and stealing bits of bacon, when she looked up at him with those huge, trusting eyes and said, Papa, can we have pancakes? The word hit him like a bullet. Papa. Lena's eyes went wide. Her face crumpled. I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I'm sorry. She burst into tears. Elias knelt down, putting himself at her level. Hey, it's okay. I didn't mean to say that. I know you're not my... It's okay, Lena. And the strange thing was, it was. You didn't do anything wrong. She threw her arms around his neck and sobbed into his shoulder while Elias held her, this tiny broken kid who'd just accidentally called him the one thing he thought he'd never be again. Father. When Lena finally calmed down and went to sit with the others, Clara appeared beside him. She didn't mean it, Clara said quietly. I know. It's just, we haven't had anybody in a long time and you've been... She struggled for words. You've been kind, that's all. I know. Clara looked at him seriously. You don't have to keep us. We understand if you want us gone once it's safe. Where would you go? I don't know. Somewhere. We've survived this long. Elias turned to face her. Clara, I'm not kicking you out. Why not? Because... He stopped. Why not? Why was he doing this? These weren't his kids, weren't his responsibility. He could have left them in that barn, could have taken them to town and made them someone else's problem. But when he looked at Clara, fierce, protective, 7-year-old Clara, who held knives and made impossible choices and still believed she could keep 5 other kids alive through sheer force of will, he saw Emma. Not literally, but the same fire, the same refusal to quit. Because you're here now, he said finally. And that means something. Clara studied his face for a long moment. Voss is coming. You know that, right? Yeah, I know. He won't stop. He never stops. Then we'll deal with it when he gets here. And if we can't, if he wins, Elias met her eyes, then he'll have to go through me first. And I promise you, Clara, I'll make him work for it. Something shifted in Clara's expression. Not quite trust. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. Okay, she said softly. Okay. Achat. 2 days later, Marshal Victor Hale showed up at the ranch. Elias saw him coming from a long way off, a single rider moving carefully through the snow, trailing a pack horse behind him. Elias grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. Stay inside, he told the kids. Don't come out unless I say. They disappeared into the house like smoke. Hale rode up slowly, hands visible, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He was a big man, mid-50s, with gray hair and a weathered face that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. Elias Mercer, Hale said, reining in his horse about 20 feet from the porch. Marshal. Mind if I step down? Depends. You here to cause trouble? Opposite. I'm here to warn you about trouble that's already on its way. Elias considered that. All right, step down, but keep your hands where I can see them. Hale dismounted carefully and walked forward, stopping at the base of the porch steps. Up close, he looked tired. More than tired, exhausted, worn down. You know why I'm here? Hale asked. I can guess. Gideon Voss is looking for 6 escaped workers. Children, technically, though he doesn't call them that. Calls them assets, property. He's got paperwork saying they belong to him, and he wants them back. They're not his. Law says different. Then the law's wrong. Haley sighed. I'm not disagreeing with you, Mercer. But what you believe and what I can enforce are 2 different things. Voss owns half the territory, including most of the judges and sheriffs. If he wants those kids back, he's got the legal authority to take them. Over my dead body. That's what I'm afraid of. Hale rubbed his face. Look, I know what Voss is doing up in those mines, known for years. It's slavery dressed up in legal contracts. It's evil. But proving it is another matter, and going against him without proof just gets good people killed. So what are you saying? Hand them over? I'm saying don't get yourself killed over something you can't win. Elias stared at the marshal for a long moment. You got kids, Hale? Had a daughter, died young.
Then you understand. Hale's face softened. Yeah, I understand, but understanding doesn't change reality. Voss is coming, probably in the next few days. And when he does, he'll have men and guns and the law on his side. What'll you have? Me. These 4 walls and a reason to fight. That's not enough. It'll have to be. They stood in silence for a moment. Snow fell softly around them. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called out harsh and lonely.
There might be another way, Hale said slowly. If you're willing to go through proper channels. What channels? There's a judge in Blackwater, Judge Cornelius Thorne. He's old, mean as a snake, but he's honest. Doesn't owe Voss anything. If you could get those kids in front of him, get them to testify about what's happening in the mines, Thorne might actually rule against Voss. Might. It's a chance. More of a chance than you'll get in a shootout.
Elias thought about that. Thought about Clara's fierce protectiveness, Noah's guilt, Milo's rattling cough. Thought about Lena calling him Papa and bursting into tears. How do I get them to Blackwater without Voss finding out? You can't. He'll know the second you try. But if you get them to the courthouse, if you get them in front of Thorne, Voss can't touch them without contempt charges. Even he's not bold enough for that. What about after? If Thorne rules in Voss's favor?
Hale didn't answer, which was answer enough. Think about it, the marshal said, but think fast. Voss won't wait forever. He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Elias standing on the porch with a choice he didn't want to make. When he went back inside, all 6 kids were pressed against the window, watching. What did he want? Clara asked. To help, I think. You trust him? Elias thought about that. Not sure yet, but he gave us an option. What option?
A trial, in Blackwater, in front of a judge who might actually listen. Noah spoke up from the back of the room. And if the judge sides with Voss, then we're back where we started. But we'd be alive, Clara said quietly. That's more than we got now. Elias looked at her, 7 years old and already thinking like a general. It means testifying, standing up in court and telling everyone what happened, all of you. I'll do it, Clara said immediately. Me too, Noah added. The other kids nodded, even little Milo with his rattling cough, and Eve with her silence, and Iris with her wide, frightened eyes. You understand what you're agreeing to? Elias asked. You'll have to tell them everything, every bad thing, every terrible thing, and Voss will be right there listening. I know, Clara said, and then softer, almost pleading. But maybe if we do this, maybe it could stop. Maybe he couldn't hurt any more kids. And that was it. That was the moment Elias Mercer stopped being a ghost haunting his own ranch and became something else, something dangerous, a father with something to protect. All right, he said. Then we fight, but we do it smart. We survive long enough to get to Blackwater, and we make sure everyone hears what these bastards have been doing. And if Voss comes first? Noah asked. Elias picked up his rifle and checked the chamber. Then we hold the line until we can't anymore. And we make damn sure he remembers this ranch for the rest of his life. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and silent and merciless, burying the valley in white, while 6 children and 1 broken man prepared for a war they had almost no chance of winning. But sometimes survival isn't about odds. Sometimes it's about making a choice to fight even when losing seems certain. And sometimes that choice is the only thing standing between children and monsters. The first real test came 3 days after Marshal Hale's visit. Elias was outside chopping wood when he saw the rider. Single man on horseback, moving slow and deliberate up the valley road. Not Voss, Elias knew that instinctively. This man sat wrong in the saddle, slouched like he'd rather be anywhere else. Elias buried the axe in the chopping block and grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the porch post. Inside, he could hear Clara organizing the younger kids, her voice sharp with practiced efficiency. Noah, take Milo and Eve upstairs. Iris, Lena, you go with them. Stay away from the windows. The rider came to a stop about 50 yards out,
and raised both hands, showing he was unarmed. He was young, maybe 25, with a patchy beard and nervous eyes that kept darting toward the tree line. "That's far enough," Elias called out. "I ain't here for trouble, mister. Just delivering a message." "From who?" "Gideon Voss." The name hung in the cold air like a curse. Elias kept the rifle pointed steady. "Say your piece and get gone." The young man cleared his throat. "Mr. Voss knows you got his property. Says if you return them unharmed within the next 2 days, there won't be consequences. But if you don't," he swallowed hard. "If you don't, he'll come collect them himself. And he won't be asking polite. Tell Voss those kids aren't property, and if he wants them, he can come try to take them." "Mister, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with." "I understand perfectly. Now get off my land before I put a bullet in your horse and make you walk back." The messenger didn't need to be told twice. He wheeled his horse around and took off at a gallop, kicking up snow and mud. Elias stood on the porch long after the rider disappeared, his jaw tight, hand steady on the rifle. Behind him, the door creaked open. Clara stepped out, her face pale but determined. 2 days, she said quietly. 2 days. That's not enough time to get to Blackwater. No, it's not. Clara wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. So what do we do? Elias lowered the rifle and looked at her. This little girl who'd held a knife on him in a freezing barn, who'd kept 5 other kids alive through sheer stubborn will, who called herself almost 8 like those extra months mattered when you'd already lived 3 lifetimes of trauma. We prepare, he said, and we hope Marshal Hale can buy us some time. And if he can't? Then we fight. Clara nodded like she'd expected that answer, like she'd been preparing for it her whole short life. She turned to go back inside, then stopped. Elias? Yeah? Why are you really doing this? And don't say you don't know. Nobody risks their life for strangers without a reason. Elias was quiet for a long moment. The wind moved through the valley, carrying the smell of pine and snow and something that felt like the edge of violence. I had a daughter once, he said finally. Emma. She was 6 when the fever took her. And for 4 years I've been trying to figure out how to stop caring about anything because caring hurt too damn much. He met Clara's eyes. But then I found you, all of you, and I realized something. What? That grief can either kill you or it can remake you into something that protects other people from feeling what you felt. And I'm tired of dying slowly. Clara studied him with those 2 old eyes. Emma, that's a pretty name. It was. She'd probably be about my age now, if she'd lived. Probably. I'm not her, though. I can't be her. I know that, Clara. I'm not asking you to be. Then what are you asking? Nothing. I'm just... Elias struggled for the right words. I'm just trying to do one good thing before I'm done, that's all. Clara absorbed that. Then, so quietly, he almost missed it. Thank you. She went back inside before he could respond. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire cleaning weapons and trying to calculate impossible odds. 6 kids, 1 adult, a ranch with limited defenses against however many men Voss decided to send. The math didn't work. No matter how he looked at it, they were outgunned, outmanned, and out of time. Around midnight, Noah came down the stairs. The kid moved like smoke, barely making a sound. He sat on the floor near Elias without saying anything, just watching the fire. Can't sleep either? Elias asked. Keep thinking about the mines, about the other kids we left behind. You think about them a lot? Every night. Noah's voice was raw. There was this one boy, Tommy. He was 9. Used to cry himself to sleep every night. I'd tell him stories to help him stop, stupid stories about knights and dragons and happy endings. He paused. He got crushed in a cave-in 2 weeks before we escaped. Just gone. Like he never existed. Elias set down the rifle he'd been cleaning. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I survived. He didn't. That's survivor's guilt talking. Trust me, I know. Noah looked up at him. Your wife and daughter, the fever. Yeah. You blame yourself for that? Every single day. Elias poked at the fire with an iron rod. Sarah got sick first, then Emma caught it from her. I stayed healthy the whole time, which meant I got to watch them both die and couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. That's not your fault either. I know. Up here. Elias tapped his head. But knowing something and believing it are different things. They sat in companionable silence for a while. The fire crackled. Wind howled outside. Somewhere upstairs, one of the younger kids cried out in their sleep, and Elias heard Clara's voice soothing them back to quiet. "She's good at that," Noah said, "taking care of people. Better than any 7-year-old should be. She had to grow up fast, we all did." Noah picked at a loose thread on his borrowed shirt. In the mines, she was the one who kept everyone going. The guards would threaten us, hurt us, try to break us down, and Clara would she'd stand up to them. This tiny girl facing down grown men with guns. She got beaten for it more than once, but she never stopped. That's a special kind of courage. Or stupidity. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Elias smiled despite himself. "You're smarter than you look, kid." "Thanks, I think." "That guard you killed. The one who was hurting Iris. You ever regret it?" Noah thought about that. "No. I regret that I had to, but I don't regret that he's dead. Does that make me a bad person?" "Makes you a person who protected someone weaker. That's not bad. That's just hard." "Will Voss come himself when he comes for us?" "Probably. Men like him need to make statements. And 6 escaped kids hiding with a dead man's rancher? That's the kind of insult he'll want to handle personally." "You keep calling yourself a dead man." "Because I am, or I was, still figuring out which." Noah studied him in the firelight. "I think you're more alive now than you've been in years." "What makes you say that?" "Because dead men don't care about anything, and you care about us. I can tell." Elias wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. Somewhere between finding these kids in that barn and watching them eat breakfast in his kitchen and listening to Lena's endless chatter, he'd started caring, started wanting them to survive, started imagining futures for them that didn't end in violence and early graves. "Yeah," he admitted. "I guess I do." "That's good," Noah said, "because we care about you too, even if we're scared to say it." The next morning brought clear skies and bitter cold. Elias woke the kids early and started teaching them things they'd need to know. Not just shooting, though he continued Clara and Noah's lessons, but practical survival skills. He showed them how to start a fire without matches, how to find water in winter, how to read trail signs and weather patterns. He taught them which plants were edible and which would kill you, how to field dress a wound, how to set a broken bone. The younger kids watched with wide eyes, treating it like an adventure. The older ones understood what he was really doing, preparing them to survive if he didn't. "Why are you teaching us this stuff?" Lena asked while Elias demonstrated how to tie a proper tourniquet. "We're staying here with you, right?" "Of course you are," Elias said, keeping his voice light. "But knowledge never hurts. You never know when something might come in handy." "Mr. Cowboy thinks we might have to run," Milo said quietly. He'd gotten better over the past week, though his cough still lingered. "That's why he's teaching us." Elias didn't insult them by lying. "I think we need to be ready for anything. That's all." Clara appeared at his elbow. "Can I talk to you? Alone?" They stepped out onto the porch. The sun was bright but gave no warmth. Snow reflected light like broken glass. "They're scared," Clara said without preamble. "I know. Lena wet the bed last night. First time since we got here. Eve's not eating again. And Iris," Clara's voice cracked. "Iris tried to cut her hair with a knife this morning. Said she wanted to be ugly so nobody would hurt her anymore." Elias felt something twist in his chest. "Is she okay?" "I stopped her before she could do much damage." "But Elias, they're breaking. They thought we were safe here, and now they know we're not. Can we really do this? Can we actually fight Voss and win?" Elias looked out at the valley, the endless white expanse of snow and rock and sky. "Honestly, I don't know, but I know we can try, and sometimes trying is enough." "That's not very reassuring." "I'm not very good at reassuring." Clara almost smiled. Almost. "You're doing okay. Better than okay, actually. These past days have been—" She struggled for words. "They've been the best days we've had since everything went bad. Even with Voss coming. Even with all of this. Because for the first time in forever, we're not just surviving, we're living." "Clara, let me finish." She took a breath. "I know you're scared. I can see it. But you're still here, still teaching us, still protecting us. And that means more than you know." Elias wanted to say something meaningful, something profound. But the words stuck in his throat, so he just nodded. Clara went back inside, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the cold.
That afternoon, Marshal Hale returned. This time he brought company, a weathered man in his 60s with intelligent eyes and an expensive coat. "Mr. Mercer," Hale called out, "got someone who wants to meet you." Elias stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "Who's your friend?" The older man dismounted stiffly. "Judge Cornelius Thorne. Marshal Hale tells me you've got 6 children who might have an interesting story to tell." Elias relaxed slightly but didn't lower the rifle. "That depends. You here officially or unofficially? Does it matter?" "It does if Voss owns you." Thorne's face darkened. "Gideon Voss doesn't own me, son. Never has, never will. I've been waiting 20 years for someone to bring me evidence against that bastard's mining operation, and so far nobody's had the spine to do it. These kids have spine, more than anyone I've ever met." "Then let me talk to them." Elias considered. Hale gave him a slight nod, a silent message of trust. Finally, Elias lowered the rifle. "Come inside. But you make any of them uncomfortable, you're gone. Clear?" "Crystal." The 6 children were arranged in the living room like soldiers awaiting inspection. When Thorne walked in, they tensed. Eve grabbed Clara's hand. Iris pressed herself into the corner. Even Noah looked ready to bolt. Thorne stopped in the doorway and took in the scene. His face, which had been stern and businesslike, softened into something that looked almost like grief. "Jesus Christ," he said quietly. "You're just babies." "We're not babies," Clara said sharply. "We survived. That makes us fighters." "You're right. I apologize." Thorne moved slowly, carefully, like approaching wild animals. "My name is Judge Cornelius Thorne. I work in Blackwater. Marshal Hale tells me you escaped from one of Voss's mining operations." Silence. "I understand you might not trust me. Why would you? Every adult in your life has either hurt you or failed to protect you. But I'm asking you to try. Because if what I've heard is true, you have information that could shut down Voss's entire operation, save other children from what you went through." "You can't stop Voss," Noah said flatly. "Nobody can. He owns too much. Too many people. He doesn't own me. And more importantly, he doesn't own the law. Not really. He's twisted it, bought his way around it, used it as a weapon. But the actual law? The law that says children can't be enslaved? That law still exists. And if you're willing to testify, willing to stand up in court and tell the truth, I can use that law to destroy him." "And if we testify and you lose?" Clara asked. "What happens to us then?" Thorne didn't sugarcoat it. "Then you run, far and fast as you can, because Voss won't let you live after that kind of betrayal. So either way, we're risking our lives." "Yes, but one way ends with you running and hiding forever. The other way ends with you free and Voss in chains. Which would you prefer?" The children looked at each other. That silent communication again, born from months of surviving together in hell. Finally, Clara spoke. "We'll do it. We'll testify." "All of you?" They nodded, even little Eve, who hadn't spoken since they arrived. Thorne's expression shifted into something fierce and determined. "All right then. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, we leave for Blackwater. It's a 2-day ride under normal circumstances, maybe 3 with children. We'll have Marshal Hale and his deputies as escort. Once we're in Blackwater, you'll stay in protective custody until the trial." "When's the trial?" Elias asked. "Fast as I can make it. Within a week if possible. Voss will fight it every step of the way, but I've got jurisdiction and I'm not letting this go." "What about Voss's men? They won't just let us ride out of here." "That's why we leave at dawn, before anyone knows we're gone." "And if they catch us on the road?" Thorne's face was grim. "Then we fight, but Hale's bringing 10 deputies. That should be enough to discourage most trouble." Elias wasn't convinced, but he didn't have better options. "All right, we leave at dawn." After Thorne and Hale left, Elias gathered the children. They sat in a circle on the floor, the fire burning low, shadows dancing on the walls. "You understand what you agreed to?" he asked. "We have to tell everyone what happened," Clara said. "In court, in front of Voss. It's going to be hard. Probably the hardest thing you've ever done. They'll ask you questions you don't want to answer, make you remember things you've tried to forget, and Voss will be right there watching." "We know," Noah said. "But if we don't do this, nothing changes. He just keeps hurting kids, forever."
You're braver than most adults I know. We're not brave, Milo said, his voice raspy from his persistent cough. We're just tired of being scared. That night, nobody slept much. Elias packed supplies for the journey, food, blankets, medicine for Milo, extra ammunition. The kids helped in that quiet, focused way people move when they're preparing for something dangerous. Around 3 in the morning, Elias found Clara sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a quilt, staring out at the darkness. Couldn't sleep? He asked, sitting beside her. Kept thinking about tomorrow. About Blackwater. About what happens if we lose. You don't have to do this, Clara. Any of you. I can take you somewhere else. Somewhere Voss can't find you. Where? There is nowhere. Men like him have reach everywhere. She pulled the quilt tighter. This is the only chance we've got. The only chance any of those other kids have got. That's a hell of a burden for a 7-year-old. I'll be 8 next month, if we live that long. We'll live, I promise. Clara looked at him. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll die trying to make sure you do. That's not comforting. Sorry, I'm not good at the comforting stuff. They sat in silence for a while. The night was perfectly still, perfectly quiet. No wind, no animals, just the soft sound of their breathing in the cold air. Elias? Clara's voice was small, uncertain. Can I tell you something? Anything. I'm scared, really scared. I've been trying to be brave for the others, trying to keep everyone together, but inside Her voice cracked. I'm terrified. What if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing in court? What if Voss wins because I wasn't strong enough? Elias put his arm around her shoulders, and Clara collapsed against him, this tiny warrior finally letting her armor crack. Being scared doesn't make you weak, he said quietly. It makes you human. And you know what? You're allowed to be scared, you're allowed to cry, you're allowed to not be strong every single second. But if I'm not strong, who's going to take care of them? Me, Marshall Hale, Judge Thorne. You're not alone anymore, Clara. That's the whole point. Clara cried then, really cried. The kind of deep, racking sobs that come from months of held-back fear and grief and trauma. Elias held her while she shook, this little girl who'd been forced to become a mother and a soldier before she'd learned how to be a child. When she finally calmed down, she pulled back and wiped her face with the quilt. Sorry, she whispered. Don't be. You needed that. I got snot on your shirt. I've had worse on my shirt, trust me. Clara almost smiled. Almost. We're going to be okay, aren't we? She asked. Elias wanted to lie, wanted to give her absolute certainty and comfort, but Clara deserved the truth. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe, maybe not. But we're going to fight like hell to make sure you are. That I can promise. Clara nodded and stood up, the quilt wrapped around her like armor. I should try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be rough. Clara? Yeah? I'm proud of you, all of you. You know that, right? Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time she smiled through them. Yeah, I know. She went back inside, leaving Elias alone on the porch with his thoughts and the darkness and the weight of 6 lives depending on choices he wasn't sure he could make correctly. Dawn came too fast and too slow at the same time. Marshal Hale arrived with 10 deputies just as the sun touched the eastern peaks. They were well-armed and grim-faced, men who understood they were riding into potential trouble. The kids were already packed and ready. Elias had given them each a horse, small, gentle ones that wouldn't spook easily. Clara insisted on riding her own, refusing to be doubled up with anyone. Even little Milo, still coughing but stronger than he'd been, climbed into the saddle with fierce determination. Elias took a last look at the ranch, his home for 4 years, his prison, and his salvation. Sarah's dresses still hanging in the closet, Emma's drawings on the wall, the ghosts he'd lived with so long they'd become company. You coming back here? Noah asked, appearing at his elbow. I don't know. Depends on what happens in Blackwater. You ever think about leaving? Starting over somewhere new? Sometimes. You? Noah looked at the ranch, the valley, the mountains. Used to think about it all the time in the mines. Dream about places where nobody knew me, where I could be someone different. But now? He paused. Now I think maybe it's not about where you are. It's about who you're with. When'd you get so wise? Had to grow up sometime. They mounted up. Hale took point, with half the deputies in front and half behind. Elias rode beside Clara, keeping close in case trouble came. The first few hours passed without incident. They moved fast, pushing the horses as hard as they dared without exhausting them. The kids held up surprisingly well. Even the younger ones stayed quiet and focused, understanding the gravity of the situation. Around noon, they stopped to rest and water the horses. Elias helped Milo down from his saddle. The kid was pale and shaking from the effort of riding. "You doing okay?" Elias asked. "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar." Milo grinned weakly. "Learned from the best." While the others rested, Hale pulled Elias aside. "We're being followed." "How many?" "Can't say for sure. At least 3 riders keeping pace about a mile back. Could be scouts. Could be advance warning for something bigger." "Voss?" "Probably. We need to move faster." "The kids are already exhausted. Push them harder and they'll fall off their horses." Hale grimaced. "Then we need to lose whoever's following us. There's a narrow canyon about 5 miles ahead. Good place for an ambush if we can get there first." "I don't like using the kids as bait." "Neither do I. But if Voss's men catch us in open ground, we're sitting ducks." Elias looked back at the 6 children, Clara helping Lena adjust her saddle, Noah sharing his water with Iris, Milo leaning against a rock and trying not to cough. They'd already been through so much. The thought of putting them in more danger made him physically ill. But Hale was right. They didn't have better options. "All right," Elias said. "The canyon. But if shooting starts, you get those kids out of there, no matter what." Agreed. They mounted up again and pushed forward, moving faster now, the horses' hooves drumming a steady rhythm against the frozen ground. The sky had clouded over, threatening more snow. Wind picked up, cutting through their layers and making the children huddle lower in their saddles. The canyon appeared as promised, a narrow cut through the rock with high walls on both sides. Perfect place for an ambush. Terrible place to be trapped. "Keep moving," Hale ordered. "Don't stop for anything." They entered the canyon at a trot, horses nervous, sensing the danger. Elias kept his hand on his rifle, eyes scanning the ridge lines above. The walls amplified every sound. Hoofbeats, breathing, the creak of saddle leather. They were halfway through when the first shot rang out. The bullet hit the rock face 6 inches from Noah's head, sending up a spray of stone chips. The kids screamed, the horses panicked, everything dissolved into chaos. "Ride!" Hale shouted. "Go, go, go!" More shots, coming from both sides of the canyon, echoing and re-echoing until it was impossible to tell how many shooters there were. Elias grabbed Clara's reins and kicked his horse forward, dragging her along. Behind him, he heard Noah yelling for Iris and Lena to stay low. A deputy went down, hit in the shoulder. Another deputy dismounted and started returning fire, giving the others time to escape. The canyon filled with smoke and noise and terror. Elias focused on one thing, getting the kids out alive. They burst from the far end of the canyon at full gallop, horses lathered and wild-eyed. Behind them, gunfire continued, sharp cracks followed by echoes that sounded like the mountains themselves were under attack. "Don't stop!" Hale shouted. "Keep riding!" They rode hard for another hour before Hale finally called a halt. Everyone dismounted in a shaking, exhausted heap. Elias immediately started checking the kids, looking for wounds, making sure nobody had been hit. "Everyone okay?" he demanded. "I think so," Clara gasped. She was pale, trembling, but uninjured. "Noah?" "We're good. Scared shitless, but good." Milo was coughing violently, bent double from the strain of the hard ride. Eve was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Iris sat perfectly still, staring at nothing. Lena had wrapped herself around Clara and refused to let go. "We lost 2 men in that canyon," Hale said grimly. 3 more wounded, and whoever was shooting at us is still out there. "How far to Blackwater?" "Full day's ride, maybe more if we have to detour. We can't keep running like this. The kids won't make it." "What choice do we have?" Before Elias could answer, Clara spoke up. "There's a cabin, about 10 miles east, an old trapper's place. We used to hide there sometimes when the guards were looking for runaways." "You sure it's still standing?" Hale asked. "It was 2 months ago." "And you think Voss's men don't know about it?" Clara met his eyes. "They never found it before. And right now it's better than nothing." Hale looked at Elias. "Your call." Elias studied the exhausted children, the nervous horses, the deputies checking ammunition and binding wounds. They needed rest, needed shelter, needed time to regroup. The cabin, he decided. We hole up there until dark, then make for Blackwater under cover of night. They found the cabin just as Clara described. A small, weathered structure tucked into a grove of pines, barely visible from the main trail. It was rough, but functional, with a stone fireplace and enough room for everyone to crowd inside. Hale posted guards while Elias got the kids settled. They were past exhausted, running on pure adrenaline and fear. He made them eat, made them drink water, made them rest even though their eyes stayed wide and watchful.
Are we going to die?
Lena asked quietly while Elias wrapped her in a blanket. The question stopped him cold. How did you answer that? How did you comfort a child when you didn't know the answer yourself? Not if I can help it, he said finally. That's not really an answer. No, it's not. I'm glad you found us, Lena said. Even if we die tomorrow, at least we got to be somewhere warm first, with someone who cared. Elias's throat tightened. We're not dying tomorrow. You can't know that. No, but I can fight like hell to make sure it doesn't happen. Lena considered that, then nodded and closed her eyes. Outside, full dark had fallen. Elias joined Hale near the door, both of them watching the tree line for movement. Think they'll find us? Elias asked. Eventually, question is whether we can get to Blackwater first. And if we can't, then we make our stand here. Not my first choice, but we've got walls and a defensible position, better than being caught in the open. They stood in silence for a while. Inside, the children slept fitfully, exhaustion finally overwhelming fear. Why are you doing this? Hale asked suddenly. Same reason you are, I'd guess. Which is? Because somebody has to. Because those kids deserve better than what they got. Because... Elias stopped, searching for the right words. Because maybe we're only as good as the people we protect when nobody's watching. Hale nodded slowly. Your wife and daughter. Hale told me about them. I'm sorry. Thanks. It was a long time ago. 4 years isn't that long. Long enough. But not long enough to stop hurting? I don't think that ever stops. You just learn to carry it differently. Inside the cabin, someone stirred. Clara appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, looking impossibly small and impossibly fierce at the same time. Can't sleep? Elias asked. Too wired. She sat down between them. Are we going to make it to Blackwater? Yeah, we are. You sound sure. I am sure, because the alternative is unacceptable. Clara smiled slightly. You know, for a guy who says he's bad at the comforting stuff, you're actually pretty decent at it. Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation to maintain. They sat together watching the darkness. A broken rancher, a child forced to become a soldier, and a marshal who'd spent 20 years waiting for a chance to do the right thing and prepared to face whatever morning would bring. Because sometimes the only thing standing between children and monsters is people willing to step into the gap. And sometimes that has to be enough. Dawn broke cold and gray over the cabin, but they didn't wait for full light. Hale had them mounted and moving before the sun cleared the mountains, pushing hard through terrain that got rougher with each mile. The kids rode in silence now, their earlier fear replaced by something harder, exhaustion mixed with grim determination. They were 3 hours out when the first riders appeared on the horizon. Company! One of Hale's deputies called out, pointing back the way they'd come. At least a dozen? Maybe more. Elias shaded his eyes against the glare. The riders were still distant, but closing fast. Too fast. They'd been tracking the group all night, probably waiting for first light to make their move. How far to Blackwater? Elias asked Hale. 4 hours at this pace, maybe 3 if we run the horses into the ground. And they'll catch us in 2. Yeah, they will. Clara had been listening. There's another way, through Widow's Pass. It's narrow, barely wide enough for horses, but it cuts 2 hours off the ride. Why didn't you mention this before? Hale demanded. Because people die in Widow's Pass. There's a reason it's called that. The trail's unstable, lots of loose rock, one wrong step, and you're falling 300 feet. Sounds delightful. It's better than getting shot. Elias looked back at the approaching riders, then at the exhausted children, then at Hale. Your call, Marshal. Hale swore under his breath. The pass. But we go slow and careful. Losing someone to a fall won't help anyone. They changed direction, angling north toward a gap in the mountains that looked more like a scar than a trail. As they got closer, Elias understood why it had earned its grim name. The path, if you could call it that, clung to the side of a cliff face, barely 3 feet wide in places, with nothing but air and a long drop on one side. "Jesus," one of the deputies muttered. "We're really doing this?" "Unless you want to explain to Voss why you let 6 kids testify against him," Hale said. "Yeah, we're really doing this." They dismounted and led the horses on foot, moving in single file. Elias put himself between the cliff edge and the kids, figuring if anyone was going to slip, better him than them. Clara went first with the other children behind her, each one holding tight to their horses' reins with white-knuckled hands. The pass was worse than Elias imagined. The trail was loose shale that shifted under their boots. Wind whipped through the gap, strong enough to make the horses nervous and the children stumble. Below, the valley floor was a distant blur of rock and snow. "Don't look down," Elias called out. "Eyes on the path, 1 step at a time." They were halfway through when Milo started coughing. Not just the usual rasp, but deep racking spasms that doubled him over and made his horse shy sideways. The animal's hooves skidded on the loose rock, coming within inches of the edge. "Whoa!" Noah grabbed the horse's bridle, pulling it back from the drop. "Easy, easy now." Milo couldn't stop coughing. Blood flecked his lips. His legs gave out and he sat down hard on the trail, gasping for air that wouldn't come. "We need to keep moving," Hale said, looking back toward the entrance of the pass. "If Voss's men catch us here, we're finished." "The kid can't breathe," Elias snapped. "Then carry him, but we have to move now." Elias scooped Milo up. The boy weighed almost nothing, all sharp angles and hollow spaces, and held him close while the coughing fit slowly subsided. Milo's face was gray, his breathing shallow and wet-sounding. "Stay with me," Elias said quietly. "You hear me? Stay with me, son." Milo nodded weakly, his small hand clutching Elias's shirt. They pushed forward, Elias carrying Milo while Noah led both horses. The trail seemed to go on forever, each step a small negotiation with gravity and luck. Twice, rocks gave way under their feet. Once, Lena's horse spooked at a bird, nearly taking her over the edge before Clara grabbed her arm and hauled her back. When they finally emerged on the far side, everyone collapsed. The deputies checked weapons and ammunition. The kids sat in a tight cluster, holding on to each other. Elias set Milo down carefully, and the boy immediately curled into a ball, still coughing, but less violently now. "That was fun," Noah said, his voice shaking. "Let's never do it again." "Agreed," Clara said. She was pale, her hands trembling, but her voice stayed steady. "How much farther?" 2 hours, Hale said. "Maybe less, but Voss's men will have to go around now. We've bought ourselves time." They mounted up again and rode hard, the landscape gradually changing from jagged peaks to rolling foothills. Signs of civilization started appearing, fence lines, cleared fields, smoke from distant chimneys. And finally, in the late afternoon light, Blackwater appeared on the horizon. The town was bigger than Elias expected, sprawling across a valley with several main streets and enough buildings to suggest real prosperity. The courthouse sat at the center, a 2-story stone structure that dominated the surrounding architecture. "That's where we're going," Hale said, pointing. "Once we're inside, Voss can't touch you without committing a crime in front of witnesses. He's bold, but he's not stupid." They rode straight through town, drawing stares from people on the street. 6 filthy, exhausted children on horseback with an armed escort wasn't a common sight. Some folks looked curious. Others looked concerned. A few looked angry, like they recognized the children and didn't appreciate what their presence meant. "Eyes forward," Elias told the kids. "Don't engage with anyone." They reached the courthouse just as the sun touched the western peaks. Hale dismounted and pounded on the door. A clerk opened it, took one look at the group, and his eyes went wide. "Get Judge Thorne," Hale ordered. "Now." Thorne appeared 5 minutes later, still wearing his riding coat like he'd just arrived himself. He took in the scene, the children, the wounded deputies, the look of controlled desperation on everyone's faces. "Inside," he said, "all of you, quickly." They filed into the courthouse, boots echoing on marble floors. The building was impressive in that way government buildings try to be, All high ceilings and dark wood and portraits of stern-faced men who'd been dead for decades. Thorne led them to a large room on the second floor. This is the jury assembly room. You'll stay here until the trial. I've already arranged for food and bedding. There's a washroom down the hall. Deputies will be posted outside at all times. When's the trial? Elias asked. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. That's fast? Has to be. Voss already knows you're coming. He'll have lawyers here by dawn, filing motions and injunctions and trying to delay everything. I want these children on the stand before he can interfere. They're exhausted, Elias said. They've been through hell getting here. I know, and I'm sorry. But if we wait, we lose. It's that simple. The kids were already spreading out across the room, exploring like prisoners checking their cell. Clara found the washroom and came back with wet cloth, cleaning the dirt off the younger ones' faces with practiced efficiency. Noah collapsed onto a bench, his eyes closing before his head hit the wood. Iris curled up in a corner, silent and watchful as always. A woman arrived carrying food, bread, cheese, dried meat, apples. The kids fell on it like wolves, eating with their hands and barely stopping to breathe. Watching them, Elias felt a fresh wave of anger at what they'd been through, what they'd been reduced to. After they ate, Thorne gathered everyone together. I need to prepare you for tomorrow. The trial will be difficult. Voss's lawyers will try to discredit you, make you look like liars or criminals or worse. They'll ask questions designed to confuse you, trip you up, make you contradict yourselves. So what do we do? Clara asked. Tell the truth. Exactly as it happened. Don't embellish, don't exaggerate, just describe what you saw and experienced. If you don't know something, say you don't know. If you don't remember, say you don't remember. The truth is powerful enough on its own. What about Voss? Noah's voice was tight. Will he be there? Yes. He has the right to face his accusers. I know that's frightening, but remember, he can't hurt you in that courtroom. He can glare, he can scowl, he can try to intimidate you, but he can't touch you. He doesn't have to touch us to hurt us, Milo said quietly. He's good at hurting people without laying a finger on them. Thorne's face softened. I know, son, but you're stronger than you think. All of you are. You survived his mines. You escaped. You made it here. That takes courage most adults don't have. After Thorne left, the room fell quiet. The kids settled in for the night, but nobody really slept. They lay on borrowed bedding, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a town at night. Elias sat by the window, watching the street below. He could see guards posted at intervals, Hale's deputies keeping watch. But he also saw other figures moving in the shadows, people who didn't belong, people who were watching the courthouse with predatory interest. Around midnight, Hale joined him. Can't sleep either. Too wired. Voss is here. Arrived an hour ago with 4 lawyers and a dozen armed men. Took rooms at the Grand Hotel like he's on vacation. He's that confident? Or he's that arrogant? Hard to tell the difference sometimes. What are our chances tomorrow? Really? Hale was quiet for a moment. Honestly, maybe 50-50. Thorne's tough and he's honest, but Voss has resources, money, influence. He'll throw everything at this. And if we lose? Then those kids become fugitives. And so do we, probably, for harboring them. Hell of a thing. Yeah, it is. They stood in silence, watching the night. Somewhere in the town, a dog barked. A drunk stumbled out of a saloon. Normal life continuing while 6 children prepared to face the man who'd tried to destroy them. Why'd you help us? Elias asked. You could have looked the other way. Lots of lawmen do. Because 20 years ago, I looked the other way on something I shouldn't have. Young girl, couldn't have been more than 15, begging me for help. Said her father was selling her to some rancher to cover a debt. I didn't believe her. Thought she was just being dramatic. Told her to go home. What happened? Found her body a week later. She tried to run away and got caught in a storm. Froze to death about 5 miles from town. Hale's voice was flat, emotionless. Could have been prevented if I'd just listened. If I'd just given a damn. So now when kids ask for help, I don't look away anymore. That wasn't your fault? Wasn't it? I had the badge, I had the authority, and I chose not to act. That's a choice, Mercer. And choices have consequences. Before Elias could respond, there was a commotion downstairs. Raised voices, someone demanding entry. Hale and Elias exchanged glances and headed for the door, both reaching for their weapons. They found Thorne in the entrance hall, blocking the doorway while a well-dressed man argued with him. The man was maybe 40, with expensive clothes and the kind of face that had never known real hardship. Behind him stood 3 other men in suits, lawyers, Elias guessed. "Don't care what time it is," the well-dressed man was saying. "I have the right to see my property." "Those children aren't property," Thorne said coldly, "and you have no right to see them until the trial." "I have contracts, legal documents, which we'll examine in court tomorrow. Now leave before I have you arrested for trespassing." The man's face reddened. "You're making a mistake, Judge. Mr. Voss is a generous man, but his patience has limits. Then it's fortunate I don't require his patience, or his generosity. Good night, Mr. Patterson." Thorne shut the door in the lawyer's face and locked it. He turned to find Elias and Hale watching from the stairs. "That was subtle," Hale said dryly. "Subtlety is overrated." Thorne rubbed his face, suddenly looking his age. "Voss is already playing games, trying to rattle us before the trial even starts." "Is it going to work?" Elias asked. "Not if I can help it. You two should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But rest didn't come. Elias lay on a borrowed cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the kids' restless sleep. Clara talked in her dreams, fragmented sentences about tunnels and darkness. Noah cried out once, then went silent. Milo coughed intermittently, wet and rattling. When dawn finally broke, everyone was already awake. They moved through morning routines mechanically, washing, eating breakfast that nobody wanted, putting on the clean clothes someone had donated. The kids looked terrified, trying to hide it and failing. "I can't do this," Lena said suddenly. She was shaking, her eyes too bright. "I can't go in there. I can't look at him." Clara knelt in front of her. "Yes, you can." "No, I can't. I'll mess up. I'll say something wrong. Lena, Clara took her hands. "Look at me. You're the bravest person I know. You know why?" "I'm not brave. I'm scared all the time." "That's exactly why you're brave. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared and you do it anyway, and you've been doing that your whole life." "What if I cry?" "Then you cry. What if you forget something?" "Then you say you forgot. There's no wrong way to tell the truth." Elias watched this 7-year-old child comforting an 8-year-old, and something in his chest cracked open. These kids had been raising each other, protecting each other, keeping each other alive in ways that should have been impossible. And now they were going to have to do it one more time, in front of strangers, in front of the man who'd hurt them. At 8:45, Thorne came to collect them. "It's time." They filed out of the room in a silent line. Elias walked beside them, close enough to touch, ready to catch anyone who stumbled. They descended the stairs and crossed the hall to the courtroom doors. The courtroom was already packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls, more crowded in the doorway. News had spread fast. 6 children testifying against Gideon Voss was the kind of spectacle people traveled to see. And there, at the defense table, sat Voss himself. He was younger than Elias expected, maybe 50, with silver hair and a face that would have been handsome if not for the coldness in his eyes. He wore an expensive suit and sat with the casual confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences for anything. When the children entered, Voss's gaze swept over them like a physical touch. His expression didn't change. No anger, no recognition, nothing. He looked at them the way someone might look at livestock. Clara stopped dead, her whole body going rigid. Behind her, Eve made a small whimpering sound. Noah's hands clenched into fists. Even Iris, silent Iris who never reacted to anything, pressed closer to the wall. "Keep walking," Elias said quietly. "Eyes forward. Don't give him anything." They made it to the front row and sat down in a tight cluster. Elias positioned himself at the end, blocking Voss from view as much as possible. Hale sat on the other side, creating a human barrier between the children and their nightmare. "All rise," the bailiff called out. "The Honorable Judge Cornelius Thorne presiding." Thorne entered from a side door and took his seat at the bench. He surveyed the packed courtroom with a stern expression, then banged his gavel once. "This court is now in session. We're here to hear testimony regarding allegations of child labor violations, unlawful imprisonment, and related charges against Mr. Gideon Voss and his mining operations. Mr. Patterson, I understand you're representing the defendant?" The lawyer from the previous night stood. I am, Your Honor. And I'd like to begin by filing a motion to dismiss. These children are the legal property of my client, acquired through legitimate contracts with—
Motion denied,
Thorne said flatly. Children cannot be property under territorial law. If you have contracts, we'll examine them, but they don't grant ownership of human beings. Next. Patterson's face reddened. Your Honor, I must protest. Protest noted and overruled. Now, unless you have something relevant to add, sit down and let's proceed. The lawyer sat, but his expression promised future battles. Thorne turned to the children. I'm going to call each of you to the stand to tell your story. I know this is frightening, but remember, you're under the protection of this court. No one can hurt you here. Do you understand? They nodded, though Elias doubted any of them believed it. Clara Vale, Thorne said, please take the stand. Clara stood slowly. She walked to the witness stand on legs that shook, climbed into the chair, and faced the crowded room with her back straight and her chin up. 7 years old and already carrying the weight of the world. State your name for the record, Thorne said gently. Clara Margaret Vale. How old are you, Clara? 7, almost 8. And do you understand the difference between truth and lies? Yes, sir. Good. Now, I need you to tell everyone here what happened to you. Start from the beginning. Take your time. Clara took a breath. Her hands gripped the arms of the chair so hard her knuckles went white. Then she began to speak. My mama and me, we lived in a cabin near White Rock, just the two of us. Daddy died when I was little, so it was always just us. We didn't have much money, but we were okay. Her voice was small but steady. Then one day, these men came. They said Daddy had debts we didn't know about. Said someone bought the debts, which meant they owned whatever Daddy owed, including me. Who were these men? Thorne asked. They worked for him. Clara pointed directly at Voss. For that man. They said he needed workers for the mines and I was coming with them. What did your mother do? Clara's voice cracked. She said no. She told them I wasn't for sale, that they couldn't have me. She stood in the doorway with a rifle and told them to leave. And then one of them shot her. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks, but her voice didn't waver. Right in front of me. She fell down and there was blood everywhere, and I was screaming, and they just took me, put me on a horse and took me to the mines. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the people who'd come for entertainment looked shaken. What happened at the mines? Thorne asked quietly. They put me to work in the tunnels. The spaces were so small only kids could fit through. We'd crawl for hours digging out rocks, filling buckets. If we didn't move fast enough, the guards would hit us. If we stopped to rest, they'd drag us out and— She faltered. And what, Clara? And they'd hurt us, different ways, whatever it took to make us too scared to stop working. How long were you there? 8 months. 8 months. Thorne's voice was hard. And during that time, did you ever try to escape? Lots of times, but they always caught us. And when they caught us— She couldn't finish. Voss's lawyer stood. Your Honor, I object. This is clearly a coached testimony. This child is too young to— Sit down, Mr. Patterson, Thorne said coldly, or I'll hold you in contempt. Clara, you're doing fine. Keep going. Clara wiped her face with her sleeve. We finally got out 2 weeks ago. Noah found a weak spot in the tunnel wall and we broke through. 6 of us made it out. But there were others. Dozens more still down there. And how did you end up at Mr. Mercer's ranch? We were hiding in an old barn during a storm. We thought we were safe, but then we heard someone coming. We thought it was Voss's men coming to take us back. She looked at Elias. But it was him. He found us, and he took care of us. Even though we were strangers, even though we had nothing to offer, he just helped. Thorne nodded. Thank you, Clara. Mr. Patterson, your witness? The lawyer stood and approached slowly, his expression calculating. Miss Vale, you said your father had debts. Is it possible your mother simply didn't know about them? Objection, Thorne said before Clara could answer. The child can't speak to what her mother did or didn't know. Sustained. Rephrase, Mr. Patterson. Did you ever see the actual contracts your mother supposedly disputed? No. So you can't say for certain they didn't exist. I know my mama wouldn't sell me. But you were 7 years old. Perhaps you misunderstood the situation. I understood just fine when they shot her. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Patterson's expression tightened. You claim you were forced to work in dangerous conditions. But isn't it true that you were provided food and shelter? We were given barely enough to survive. But you did survive, for 8 months. That suggests the conditions weren't as dire as you're claiming. Clara's voice went cold. 12 kids died while I was there. 3 from cave-ins, 4 from sickness, 2 from... Her voice broke. From other things. The rest just gave up, stopped eating, stopped trying, just laid down and died. So no, the food and shelter weren't enough. Patterson tried a few more questions, but each answer made things worse for Voss. Finally, he gave up and returned to his seat. You may step down, Clara, Thorne said gently. You did well. Clara returned to her seat, trembling. Elias put his arm around her and she collapsed against him, all the strength draining out of her at once. Noah Reed, Thorne called. Please take the stand. Noah walked up with his shoulders back and his jaw set. He looked older than 13 sitting in that chair, like he'd aged years in the past few weeks. His testimony was harder, more violent. He described the daily brutality of the mines in detail that made people in the courtroom flinch. He talked about children being beaten for dropping tools, starved for talking back, worse for trying to escape. And he told them about the guard he'd killed. I hit him with a rock, Noah said, his voice matter of fact. Hit him maybe 10, 12 times, until he stopped moving, until I was sure he couldn't hurt Iris anymore. The girl he was assaulting? Thorne clarified. Yes, sir. And you felt you had no other choice? No, sir. There were no guards who would help, no one to tell. It was just us kids and the men who hurt us. So when I saw him hurting Iris, I made a choice. I'd rather be a killer than let another kid get hurt if I could stop it. Do you regret it? Noah thought about that. I regret that it was necessary, but no, sir, I don't regret that he's dead. I'd do it again. The honesty was devastating. You could see it hit people. This 13-year-old boy calmly admitting to murder and meaning every word. Patterson's cross-examination tried to paint Noah as violent, unstable, a criminal, but every question just reinforced what Noah had done and why. By the end, even Patterson looked shaken. One by one, the other children testified. Milo, coughing through his answers, described watching kids die from lung infections caused by mine dust. Lena, crying the whole time, told them about being locked in darkness for days as punishment. Even Iris, who still wouldn't speak, wrote her testimony on paper that Thorne read aloud. Descriptions of abuse so horrific that several people in the courtroom got up and left. Through it all, Voss sat unmoved. His expression never changed. He looked bored, if anything, like this was all a tedious inconvenience. When the last child finished, Thorne called for a brief recess. People filed out of the courtroom in stunned silence. Elias took the kids back to the assembly room where they collapsed in various states of exhaustion and relief. Is it over? Lena asked. Not yet, Elias said. But the hard part is, what happens now? Now Voss has to defend himself, has to explain why 6 kids would all tell the same story if it wasn't true. An hour later, they reconvened. Patterson called several witnesses, foremen from the mines who swore conditions were fine, clerks who presented contracts showing the children were legally acquired, even a doctor who claimed to have examined the children regularly and found them healthy. But none of it could erase what everyone had heard that morning. None of it could undo the truth 6 children had spoken. Finally, Voss himself took the stand. He was smooth, polished, every inch the successful businessman. He denied everything calmly, reasonably, like the accusations were simply too absurd to take seriously. Those children were rescued from poverty and given opportunity, he said. Yes, they worked, but they were compensated, fed, housed. If some of them found the work difficult, well, life is difficult. That's not a crime. And the girl who claims her mother was murdered? Thorne asked. A tragic accident during a legal repossession. The woman became violent. My men defended themselves. And the boy who killed your guard. A violent criminal who should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. It went on like that. Voss with an answer for everything, an explanation for every accusation. He was good at this, Elias realized. He'd probably talked his way out of worse. But then Thorne asked one question that changed everything. Mr. Voss, if these children were treated so well, why did they risk death to escape? Why did they hide in a freezing barn rather than return to your mines? Voss's mask slipped for just a second. His eyes went cold and hard, the civilized veneer cracking to reveal something predatory underneath. Because they're children, he said. Children are foolish, impulsive, ungrateful. You give them everything and they throw it away chasing fairy tales of freedom. It's in their nature. And there it was, the contempt, the fundamental belief that these kids were property to be managed, not people to be protected. The courtroom erupted, people shouting, the gavel banging, chaos spreading like wildfire. Thorne finally restored order, but the damage was done. Voss had shown everyone exactly who he was. This court will adjourn for deliberation, Thorne announced. We'll reconvene in 2 hours for my ruling. Those 2 hours crawled by. The kids sat in the assembly room, too exhausted to talk, too wired to rest. Elias paced. Hale cleaned his guns. Nobody had any idea which way this would go. When they finally returned to the courtroom, the crowd had somehow grown even larger. Word had spread. This was history happening in real time. Thorne took his seat, and the room fell silent. I've reviewed the testimony and evidence, he said, and I've come to a decision. The contracts presented by Mr. Voss's legal team are hereby declared void and unenforceable. Debt cannot be inherited by minor children, and even if it could, human beings cannot be legal property under territorial law. A cheer started to rise, but Thorne silenced it with his gavel. Furthermore, I'm issuing a warrant for Mr. Voss's arrest on charges of murder, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, and conspiracy. All of his mining operations are to be shut down immediately pending a full investigation. Any children found in those mines are to be released into protective custody. Voss stood, his face purple with rage. You can't do this. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Hale said, appearing behind him with handcuffs, which I suggest you exercise. The courtroom exploded, people cheering, others protesting, Voss's lawyers shouting objections that nobody could hear over the noise. Hale and his deputies surrounded Voss, who fought and cursed as they dragged him away. Through it all, 6 children sat frozen, unable to believe what they'd just heard. Is it real? Clara whispered. Did we really win? Elias looked at her tear-stained face, at all of them, these impossible kids who'd survived hell and lived to see the other side. Yeah, he said, his own voice breaking. You won. And then they were crying, all of them, even stoic Noah and silent Iris, crying with relief and exhaustion and the overwhelming weight of finally being free. People crowded around, offering congratulations and comfort, but the kids only had eyes for each other and for Elias, this broken man who'd chosen to protect them when nobody else would. Outside the courthouse, snow had started falling again, soft and clean and new, covering everything in white, while 6 children learned what it meant to be safe. The celebration didn't last long because freedom turned out to be more complicated than a judge's ruling. They stayed in Blackwater for 3 more days while Thorne processed the paperwork and Hale coordinated raids on Voss's mining operations. The news that came back was worse than anyone expected. They found 47 children in the tunnels, some as young as 4 years old, most of them sick, all of them terrified. 2 kids died during the rescue, their bodies too broken to survive even after being pulled from the darkness. Elias watched Clara absorb this information with the same stoic expression she wore when testifying. But later that night, he found her sitting in the dark assembly room, staring at nothing. You okay? He asked, already knowing the answer. We saved 47 kids. Her voice was flat, empty. But how many died before we got out? How many are buried up in those mountains where nobody will ever find them? Elias sat down beside her. You can't think like that. Why not? It's true. Tommy, the boy Noah told you about, he died because we weren't fast enough. And how many others? Dozens? Hundreds? Clara, don't. She turned to look at him, and her eyes were devastated. Don't tell me it's not my fault. Don't tell me I did my best. Because it doesn't change anything. Those kids are still dead. Elias didn't have an answer for that because she was right. They'd won, but the victory was soaked in the blood of children they'd been too late to save. That was the truth nobody wanted to talk about. Justice came after the crime, after the damage, after the graves were already dug. You know what the worst part is? Clara said quietly. Part of me is glad. Glad that I survived when they didn't. Glad that I'm here and they're not. What kind of person does that make me? A human one, with a survival instinct that kept you alive when others couldn't hold on. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. But it makes it understandable. Elias leaned back against the wall. I felt the same way after Sarah and Emma died. Guilty that I lived. Angry that I had to keep breathing when they couldn't. That guilt almost killed me, Clara. Don't let it do the same to you. How do you live with it? You don't. Not really. You just learn to carry it better. And you do something with the time you have left. You make it count for something. Clara absorbed that in silence. After a while, she leaned against his shoulder, this fierce little warrior finally letting herself be small. I'm tired, Elias. I'm so tired of being strong. I know, but you don't have to be strong all the time anymore. That's the whole point. The next morning brought visitors. A woman from the Territorial Welfare Office, prim and official in her pressed suit and clipboard, accompanied by 2 assistants. She introduced herself as Mrs. Helena Blackwood and explained in a clipped, businesslike tone that she was there to determine appropriate placement for the children. Placement? Noah asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. Yes, you'll need proper homes, families who can provide for your needs. We have several approved foster families in the territory who— No. Clara stood up, her small frame rigid with defiance. We're not splitting up. Mrs. Blackwood blinked. I understand you formed attachments, but the reality is that very few families can accommodate 6 children. We'll do our best to keep siblings together, but we're not siblings, Milo said. We're family. That's different. Nevertheless, they're not going anywhere, Elias said quietly. All eyes turned to him. They're staying with me. Mrs. Blackwood looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Mr. Mercer, while your assistance has been commendable, you're a single man with no experience raising children. Surely you understand that what these children need is stability, safety. People who won't treat them like problems to be solved or inventory to be distributed. They need to stay together, and they need someone who actually gives a damn about what happens to them. Mr. Mercer, I'm filing for legal custody. All 6 of them. The room went dead silent. The children stared at him with wide eyes. Mrs. Blackwood looked like he'd suggested something obscene. That's highly irregular, she said finally. The process for adopting one child is lengthy. 6 children simultaneously it's unprecedented. The home visits alone would take months. And then there's the matter of financial stability, character references, not to mention, then we'll do it, however long it takes. And in the meantime, they stay with me. I've got a ranch with plenty of room, enough resources to provide for them. And unlike some orphanage or foster system, I actually know these kids. I know what they've been through. Mrs. Blackwood's expression softened slightly. Mr. Mercer, I appreciate your intentions, but you must understand these children have experienced severe trauma. They'll require specialized care, possibly years of it. Medical attention, psychological counseling, educational support. Are you truly prepared to take on that responsibility? Elias looked at the 6 kids watching him with desperate hope written across their faces. Clara, with her fierce protectiveness. Noah with his guilt and courage. Milo still coughing, still fighting. Silent Iris who communicated through drawings. Lena who'd accidentally called him Papa. Little Eve who hadn't spoken in a year. No, he said honestly. I'm not prepared. I've got no idea what I'm doing, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to try. That's more than they've gotten from anyone else. Mrs. Blackwood studied him for a long moment. I'll need to conduct a home inspection, interview you extensively, verify your finances and background, and even if everything checks out, the final decision will be up to Judge Thorne. I understand. Very well. I'll begin the preliminary paperwork. She gathered her things with brisk efficiency. But Mr. Mercer, I must warn you, wanting to help and being able to provide appropriate care are 2 very different things. I've seen many well-intentioned people overwhelmed by the reality of caring for traumatized children. Don't make promises you can't keep. After she left, the kids surrounded Elias in a tight cluster. Did you mean it? Clara asked. Really mean it? Yeah, I meant it. Why? It was the same question she'd asked in the barn, on the porch, in a dozen different moments, and Elias still didn't have a good answer except the truth. Because somewhere between finding you in that barn and sitting in that courtroom, you stopped being strangers. You became, he struggled for the right word, you became mine, and I don't abandon what's mine. Lena started crying first, then Eve, then even Noah's eyes got suspiciously bright. Claire just nodded like she'd known all along but needed to hear him say it. That afternoon, Judge Thorne summoned Elias to his chambers. The judge sat behind a massive desk covered in legal documents and looked at Elias with an expression that was hard to read. "You're serious about this," Thorne said. "The adoption." "Yes, sir. You understand what you're taking on? 6 children with severe trauma, health issues, probable nightmares and behavioral problems. Not to mention the financial burden. I've got the ranch, it's paid for, I've got savings, and I can work. What about experience? You said yourself you don't know what you're doing. I was a father once, for 6 years. Maybe that counts for something." Thorne leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Blackwood is a stickler for protocol. She'll make this process as difficult as possible, not out of malice, but because she genuinely believes the system is best. You're going to face months of scrutiny. I can handle scrutiny, and if she recommends against the adoption, then I'll fight it, appeal it, do whatever it takes." Thorne smiled slightly. "You know, when Hale first told me about you, I thought you were just some grieving widower playing hero. But you're not, are you?" "I don't know what I am. You're a stubborn son of a bitch who won't quit when any sensible person would, which is exactly what those kids need." Thorne pulled out a document. "I'm granting temporary custody pending the completion of Mrs. Blackwood's investigation. You'll take the children back to your ranch, and she'll conduct her evaluation there. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "One more thing, Mercer. If you hurt those kids, if you fail them, if you decide 6 months from now that this is too hard and you want out, I will personally make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. Clear?" "Crystal." "Good. Now get out of here and take those children home." The ride back to the ranch took 2 days, but this time there was no urgency. No riders chasing them, no fear of bullets in the dark. They traveled slowly, stopping to rest, letting the kids explore and play, and just be children for maybe the first time in their lives. Lena discovered wildflowers growing in an alpine meadow and insisted on picking a bouquet for everyone. Milo, riding double with Noah, pointed out birds and asked 1,000 questions about what they were called and where they lived. Even Iris smiled once, a quick flash of expression before she went back to her usual watchful silence. When they finally crested the ridge and the ranch came into view, something in Elias's chest loosened. The place looked different now, less like a tomb and more like a home waiting to be filled. "Is that it?" Lena asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Is that where we're going to live?" "If you want to," Elias said. "It's so big. Plenty of room for everyone." They rode into the yard as the sun touched the western peaks, painting everything gold. The kids dismounted and stood in a cluster, taking it all in. The house, the barn, the corrals, the fields stretching toward the mountains. "Which room is mine?" Lena asked. "You can pick any one you want, except the master bedroom. That one's mine." "Can we really pick any room?" "That's what I said." The kids scattered, running into the house to explore. Their voices echoed through the empty rooms, calling out discoveries and claiming territory. Elias followed more slowly, trying to see the place through their eyes. It needed work. The house was dusty, furniture covered in sheets, Sarah's things still everywhere. He'd have to clean it up, make space, turn this museum of grief into something that could hold 6 lives. He found Clara standing in Emma's old room. The little bed was still made, toys arranged on shelves, drawings covering the walls. "Was this your daughter's room?" Claire asked quietly. "Yeah. It's nice. Small, but nice." "You want it?" Clara turned to look at him. "Are you sure? It seems like it should stay the way it is. It's been that way for 4 years. Maybe it's time for something new." Clara walked to the window, looking out at the valley. "What was she like?" "Emma." Elias leaned against the doorframe. "Fierce, stubborn, too smart for her own good. She loved books and horses and driving me crazy with questions about everything. She sounds like she was wonderful." "She was. I'll take good care of her room, I promise." "I know you will." That night they had their first real dinner as something resembling a family. Elias cooked badly, burning the potatoes and oversalting the meat, but nobody complained. They ate sitting around the big table, passing food and talking over each other, and slowly filling the silence that had lived in this house for so long. After dinner, Noah helped with dishes while the younger kids explored outside. Clara organized bedtime routines with the efficiency of a military commander. By the time full dark fell, everyone was tucked into beds and blankets, exhausted but safe. Elias sat by the fire, listening to the house settle. Footsteps overhead. Milo's cough, quieter now. Someone talking in their sleep. The sounds of life. He thought about Sarah and Emma, about the family he'd lost. Part of him still felt guilty, like accepting these new children meant betraying the old ones. But another part, the part that had started healing without him noticing, knew that Sarah would have approved. She'd always had room in her heart for strays and lost things. "You still up?" Noah appeared in the doorway, dressed in borrowed nightclothes that were too big for his thin frame. "Can't sleep?" "Too quiet. I'm not used to quiet." "Me neither." Noah sat down by the fire. "You really going to keep all of us? Even if it's hard?" "That's the plan." "Why?" Elias poked at the fire with an iron rod. "You want the truth?" "Always." "Because 4 years ago I wanted to die. Not actively, not enough to do anything about it, but I didn't care about living anymore. And then I found you guys in that barn, and suddenly I had a reason to care again. Sounds selfish when I say it like that. Doesn't sound selfish, sounds honest. Maybe. But the point is, you kids gave me something, and I want to give you something back. A home, safety, a chance to just be kids instead of survivors. We'll always be survivors, though. That doesn't just go away. No. But maybe you can be other things too. Students, friends, whatever you want to be. Noah stared into the fire. "I killed a man. That's always going to be true." "Yes, it will be." "Does that make me a bad person?" "You asked me that before, and the answer's still no. It makes you someone who protected another person from harm. That's not evil, Noah. It's just hard." "Will you teach me?" Noah asked suddenly. "How to live with it? Because right now I don't know how." Elias looked at this kid who'd been forced to make impossible choices and still somehow remain decent. "I'll try. Fair warning, though, I'm still figuring it out myself." "That's okay. At least we'll figure it out together." The next few weeks fell into an awkward rhythm as they all learned how to be a household instead of a group of survivors. Elias discovered he was terrible at cooking, mediocre at laundry, and completely lost when it came to things like bedtime routines and homework schedules. The kids were patient with him, mostly, though Clara took over a lot of the organizational duties by default. Mrs. Blackwood showed up regularly, clipboard in hand, observing everything. She watched Elias interact with the kids, interviewed them separately about their treatment, inspected the house from top to bottom. Her expression remained professionally neutral, giving nothing away. "You're doing adequate," she said after one particularly long visit, "though I have concerns about the lack of structure. Children need routines, Mr. Mercer." "We're working on it." And the girl, Clara. "She seems to have taken on far too much responsibility for someone her age. That's concerning. She's been responsible for survival for a long time, hard habit to break. Nevertheless, she should be allowed to be a child, not a surrogate parent." "I know. We're working on that too." Everything was working on it because that's all they could do. Take it day by day, mistake by mistake, slowly learning how to be something resembling a family. Milo's cough finally started improving with regular medicine and proper food. Eve began speaking again, just a word here and there at first, but words nonetheless. Iris filled sketchbook after sketchbook with drawings of the ranch, the mountains, the family. Lena's endless energy found outlet in helping with chores and animals, and she only called Elias Papa when she forgot to be careful about it. Noah remained the hardest to reach. He worked himself to exhaustion every day, helping with ranch tasks, repairing things that didn't need repair, staying busy to avoid thinking. Elias recognized the pattern because he'd lived it himself. One afternoon, he found Noah in the barn trying to fix a wagon wheel that was beyond saving. "That wheel's done," Elias said. "No amount of work's going to change that. Maybe if I just—" "Noah, stop." The boy looked up, his face streaked with sweat and dirt. You don't have to earn your place here, Elias said. You don't have to prove your worth by working yourself to death. You're part of this family because you exist, not because of what you can do. I don't know how to do that. Just exist. Me neither. But maybe we can learn together. Noah's face crumpled. I keep seeing him. The guard I killed. Every time I close my eyes, I see him falling. And part of me is glad he's dead, which makes me feel like a monster. You're not a monster. You're a kid who did what he had to do to protect someone. And yeah, it's going to stay with you. Yeah, you're going to see it when you close your eyes. But that doesn't define you. What you do now, how you choose to live, that's what matters. What if I can't move past it? Then you carry it. Like I carry Sarah and Emma. Like Clara carries her mother. Like all of us carry the things that broke us. We carry them because we have to, but we don't let them be the only things we are. Noah wiped his face with his sleeve. I want to be better. I want to be someone worth saving. You already are, son. You just can't see it yet. 2 months after the trial, news arrived that Gideon Voss had died in prison. The official report said natural causes, a heart attack in his cell. But rumors suggested something else, that the other prisoners had dealt with him in the way prisoners sometimes dealt with men who hurt children. Elias told the kids that evening at dinner. He'd debated keeping it from them, but they deserved to know. He's dead, Clara said flatly. Voss is dead. Yes. Silence around the table. The kids processed this information differently. Lena looked relieved. Milo looked confused. Iris showed no reaction at all. Noah stared at his plate. Eve, who'd been getting better about speaking, said quietly, "Good." "How do you feel?" Elias asked Clara. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel something. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. But I just feel empty, like I used up all my feelings already." "That's normal, is it?" "Because it doesn't feel normal. It feels wrong. This man destroyed my life, killed my mother, and now he's dead, and I don't even care." "You care. You just don't know how to process it yet. Give it time." That night, Elias found Clara on the porch, the same spot where they'd sat so many times before. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Anything. Part of me wishes I could have been the one to kill him. Is that terrible?" "No, it's honest. But I'm 7 years old. I shouldn't think things like that." "You're 7 years old who survived hell. You get to think whatever you need to think." Clara leaned against him. "When does it stop hurting? When do the nightmares stop?" "I don't know. Maybe never completely, but they get less frequent. And eventually, the good moments outnumber the bad ones." "You promise?" "I promise to try and make that true." 3 months after they arrived at the ranch, Mrs. Blackwood made her final visit. She spent hours going through paperwork, interviewing the children one last time, making notes on her eternal clipboard. When she finally sat down with Elias in the kitchen, her expression was impossible to read. "Mr. Mercer," she began, "when I first met you, I had serious doubts about this arrangement. A single man with no training attempting to care for 6 traumatized children seemed like a disaster waiting to happen." Elias braced himself for rejection. "However," she continued, "what I've observed over these past months has changed my opinion. These children are thriving, they're healthy, they're happy, and most importantly, they feel safe. You've provided something no institution could, a genuine home. So I'm recommending full approval of your adoption petition. All 6 children. Judge Thorne will need to sign off, but I don't foresee any issues." Elias felt something in his chest crack open. "You're serious?" "Quite serious, though I do have some conditions. The children will need to be enrolled in school, they'll require regular medical checkups. And I'd like Clara to see someone about her tendency to take on too much responsibility." "Done. All of it." Mrs. Blackwood allowed herself a small smile. "You're a good man, Mr. Mercer. Those children are lucky to have you." "I think I'm the lucky one." The paperwork took another 2 weeks, but finally the letter arrived. Official, legal, permanent. 6 children were now officially his. Elias gathered everyone in the living room and read them the letter. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then chaos erupted. Lena jumped on him, nearly knocking him over. Milo started crying. Even Noah smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "Does this mean we can stay?" Eve asked in her quiet, careful voice. "Forever." "Forever," Elias confirmed. And we're really a family? Lena asked. An actual family? An actual family. Can we call you Dad? Milo asked hesitantly. Or is that, I don't know, is that okay? Elias's throat tightened. He'd avoided thinking about names, about what these kids would call him, because names made things real and permanent and terrifying. But looking at their hopeful faces, he realized the terrifying part wasn't them calling him Dad. It was wanting them to. Yeah, he said roughly. You can call me Dad. That night, after everyone was asleep, Elias walked up the hill behind the ranch to where Sarah and Emma were buried. The graves were simple, marked with wooden crosses and surrounded by wildflowers that had grown up over the years. He knelt in the grass and spoke quietly to the darkness. I hope this is okay. I hope you understand. I'm not trying to replace you. I could never replace you. But these kids needed someone, and I needed them, and somehow it worked out. So now I'm a father again, to 6 instead of 1, and I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up. The wind moved through the grass, carrying the smell of pine and earth and growing things. I wish you could meet them. Clara would make you laugh. She's so fierce and stubborn. Noah would remind you of your brother, always trying to fix everything. The little ones would climb all over you within 5 minutes. You'd love them. I know you would. He stayed there for a long time, talking to ghosts and making promises to the future, until the stars came out and the cold drove him back down to the warm house where 6 children slept safe in beds that belonged to them. Inside, someone had left a lamp burning in the kitchen. Clara sat at the table, unable to sleep as usual, reading one of Emma's old books. You okay? Elias asked. Yeah, just thinking. About? About how weird life is. A year ago I was in those mines thinking I'd die there. And now I'm here, in this house, reading books and eating regular meals and calling someone Dad. It doesn't feel real. It's real, I promise. Clara closed the book and looked at him seriously. Are you happy? Really? The question surprised him. What makes you ask that? Because you gave up your whole life for us. Your quiet ranch, your freedom to be alone. And now you're stuck with 6 kids who have nightmares and need constant attention and probably cost a fortune to feed. Stuck isn't the word I'd use. What word would you use? Elias thought about that. About the house that now felt alive instead of dead. About the noise and chaos and constant demands. About watching Noah finally relax enough to laugh. About Lena's endless questions. About Milo's improving cough and Iris's drawings and Eve's quiet words. About Clara's fierce love for her makeshift siblings. Blessed, he said finally. I'd use the word blessed. Clara smiled. That's a good word. Yeah, it is. They sat together in comfortable silence while the lamp burned low and the house settled around them, full of life and possibility and the strange, imperfect beauty of a family that had chosen itself when nobody else would. The first year was the hardest, though nobody said it out loud. Elias learned quickly that legal guardianship and actual parenting were completely different animals. The paperwork said he was a father. The reality was messier. 6 kids with 6 different sets of trauma, 6 different ways of coping, 6 different speeds of healing. Some days felt like progress. Other days felt like drowning. Noah had nightmares that left him screaming and violent, once punching through a window in his sleep and not remembering it the next morning. Clara still couldn't relax, still checked locks 3 times before bed, still woke at the slightest sound ready to protect everyone. Milo's cough lingered, flaring up whenever he got stressed or tired. Iris spoke maybe 10 words a month, and half of those were whispered so quietly you had to strain to hear them. Lena's boundless energy masked a terror of being alone. She followed Elias everywhere, even to the outhouse, panicking if she couldn't see him for more than a few minutes. And Eve, who'd made such progress with speaking, would sometimes regress into days of complete silence without warning or explanation. School started in September, which brought a whole new set of problems. The local schoolhouse had 1 teacher for 30 students ranging from 6 to 14, and Miss Sarah Dunmore was young and overwhelmed and completely unprepared for 6 traumatized children who'd spent the last year underground. The first week, Noah got into a fight with an older boy who made a comment about Voss's mine rats. Noah broke the kid's nose. The second week, Clara was sent home for correcting the teacher's arithmetic in front of the class, loudly and repeatedly. The third week, Milo had a coughing fit so severe they had to carry him out of the building. Elias got called in for a meeting with Miss Dunmore, who sat behind her desk looking exhausted and apologetic. Mr. Mercer, I want to help these children. I truly do, but I'm not equipped to deal with their difficulties. Noah is violent. Clara is disruptive. The younger ones can't focus. I think perhaps they need specialized education, or at least more time before integrating with other students. They need to be normal kids, Elias said. They've spent enough time being treated differently.
But they are different. That's not judgment, it's fact. They've been through things most adults couldn't survive. You can't just expect them to sit quietly and learn geography like nothing happened. So what are you suggesting? Miss Dunmore twisted her hands together. Give them another year at home. Let them heal more. Then try again. Elias wanted to argue, wanted to insist his kids were fine, but he couldn't, because she was right. They weren't ready. Hell, he wasn't ready. I'll talk to them, he said finally. That night at dinner, which had become the family meeting time by default, Elias brought it up as gently as he could. Miss Dunmore thinks you might benefit from more time at home before going back to school. She thinks we're too broken to be around normal kids, Clara translated flatly. That's not what she said. It's what she meant, though. Clara pushed food around her plate. We embarrass her. We make the other students uncomfortable. It's easier if we just stay away. Is that how you feel? Clara was quiet for a moment. No, but I understand it. We are different, and pretending we're not doesn't help anyone. I liked school, Lena said quietly. I liked learning about numbers and letters, but the other kids looked at me like I was dirty, like they could catch what I had. What about you, Noah? Elias asked. Noah shrugged. School's fine. I can handle the stares. What I can't handle is people talking about the mines like they weren't real, like we made it up for attention. That's when I want to hit things. So we'll do school at home, Elias decided. For now, I'll teach you what I can and we'll figure out the rest as we go. You're not a teacher, Clara pointed out. No, but I can read, write, and do math. And between us, we've got enough books to start. It won't be perfect, but perfect's overrated anyway. So they created their own strange version of education. Mornings were for basics, reading, writing, arithmetic. Elias taught what he knew and invented the rest. Clara, who was frighteningly smart, often ended up teaching the younger kids herself. Afternoons were for practical skills, ranch work, animal care, cooking, mending, things they'd need to survive. But the most important education happened in the spaces between lessons. Like the day Milo asked why bad things happened to people who didn't deserve it. They were in the barn, mucking stalls, and the question came out of nowhere. I mean, what did we do? Milo said. Why did we end up in those mines? Why did our parents die? Why did any of it happen? Elias stopped working and leaned on his pitchfork. This was one of those moments where the wrong answer could do real damage. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't think there's a reason. Bad things just happen sometimes. To good people, to bad people, to everyone. The question isn't why it happened. The question is what you do after. What if you don't know what to do after? Then you figure it out one day at a time. That's all anyone can do. Milo thought about that while scooping manure. Do you think we'll ever be normal? Like other kids? What's normal? I don't know. Happy. Not scared all the time. Not remembering bad things when you close your eyes. Maybe. Maybe not. But you know what? Normal's not as important as people think. You can be scared and still be happy. You can remember bad things and still have good days. It's not about being perfect. It's about being alive and trying. That doesn't sound very hopeful. No, but it's honest. And honest is worth more than hopeful sometimes. Winter came early that year, burying the valley in snow by November. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud from books, playing games Clara invented, listening to Elias tell stories about his time as a cavalry scout. Slowly, the house started feeling less like a shelter and more like a home. But trauma doesn't heal on a schedule, and setbacks came without warning. One night in January, Elias woke to the sound of breaking glass. He grabbed his rifle and ran downstairs to find Noah in the kitchen, surrounded by shattered dishes, his hands bleeding, his face twisted with rage and grief. Noah! I can't do this. Noah's voice was raw.
I can't keep pretending everything's fine. It's not fine. It's never going to be fine.
What happened? I had the dream again. The guard. But this time it was different. This time I kept hitting him even after he was dead.
I kept hitting him, and I liked it. What kind of person does that make me? Elias set down the rifle and approached slowly. It makes you someone dealing with trauma. Dreams aren't reality, Noah. What you feel in a dream doesn't define who you are, doesn't it? Because I've been thinking, what if I'm like him? Like Voss? What if violence is just in me and I'm fooling myself thinking I'm better? You're nothing like Voss. How do you know? You didn't know me before. Maybe the mines didn't break me. Maybe they just revealed what was always there. Elias sat down in the mess of broken dishes. You want to know how I know you're not like him? Because you're terrified you might be. Voss never questioned himself, never wondered if he was doing wrong. People like him don't have doubts. But you? You're eaten up with doubt. That's how I know you're good. I killed someone. Yes, you did. And that's something you'll carry forever. But context matters, Noah. Intent matters. You killed to protect. Voss killed for profit. Those aren't the same thing. Noah's shoulders shook. I just want it to stop. The dreams, the guilt, all of it. I want to be normal. I know, but normal's not coming. Not the way you think. So instead of chasing normal, maybe try for something else. Like what? Like peace. Not perfect peace. Not happiness all the time. Just moments where it doesn't hurt as much. Where you can breathe without feeling like you're drowning. Those moments add up eventually. They cleaned up the broken dishes together, and Elias wrapped Noah's bleeding hands, and neither of them mentioned it again. But something shifted that night. Noah started talking more about his feelings instead of bottling them up. Started admitting when he was struggling instead of pretending to be fine. Spring brought new challenges. Clara turned 8 in March, and they celebrated with a cake Elias baked that came out lopsided and undercooked in the middle. She laughed when she cut into it, genuine laughter that lit up her whole face. This is terrible, she said, grinning. Thanks. I worked hard on it. No, I mean, it's perfect. It's the best birthday cake I've ever had. It's probably the only birthday cake you've ever had. Exactly, which makes it the best. But that night, after everyone else was asleep, Elias found Clara on the porch, crying. What's wrong? She wiped her face angrily. My mama's birthday was in March too, 3 days after mine, and I realized today that I can't remember her face anymore. Not clearly. I remember pieces, but not her whole face. How can I forget my own mother's face? Elias sat beside her. That's how memory works. It fades. Not because you don't love them, but because that's what brains do. They let go of details to make room for new things. But I don't want to let go. If I forget her face, then she really is gone. She's not gone. She's right here. Elias touched his chest. The love doesn't fade, Clara. Just the details. And that's okay. That's how we keep living. It doesn't feel okay. No, it doesn't, but it is. They sat together in the dark, and eventually Clara's crying stopped, and they went back inside where 5 other kids slept safe and warm. Summer came with long days and hard work. The ranch demanded constant attention, fences to mend, animals to tend, crops to plant and harvest. The kids helped with everything, learning skills they'd never needed in their old lives. Noah became surprisingly good with horses. Milo had a gift for coaxing sick animals back to health. Even Iris, still mostly silent, communicated with animals in ways that seemed almost magical. One afternoon in July, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was middle-aged, well-dressed, with the look of someone who worked with papers instead of his hands. He introduced himself as Deputy Jonah Pike, the same Pike who'd testified against Voss, bringing the ledgers and evidence that sealed the conviction. Mr. Mercer, Pike said, dismounting. I'm sorry to arrive unannounced. I was hoping to speak with you and the children. About what? About compensation? The territorial government has seized Voss's assets, including his mining operations and personal wealth. After debts and legal fees, there's still a considerable sum remaining. The governor has ruled that the surviving children, including your 6, are entitled to restitution for their forced labor and suffering. Elias blinked. How much are we talking about? Pike named a figure that made Elias's head spin. Enough money to secure all 6 kids' futures, pay for education, medical care, whatever they needed. There's more, Pike continued. Several businessmen have asked me to deliver offers to purchase portions of Voss's mining operations. They're promising to reform the labor practices, hire adult workers at fair wages. They want to meet with you and the children to discuss terms. Why would they need to meet with us? Because legally the children are part owners now. Any sale requires their approval. That evening, Elias gathered everyone to explain the situation. The kids listened with varying degrees of comprehension. The younger ones didn't really understand money in those amounts, but the older ones grasped the implications. So we're rich? Lena asked. Sort of. The money's being held in trust until you're older, but yes, you'll have financial security. What about the mines? Clara asked. Are they really going to fix them, make them safe? That's what they say. And you believe them? Elias considered that. I don't know, but I think you should be part of that conversation. All of you. This affects you more than anyone. They met with the potential buyers a week later in Judge Thorne's office. 3 men in expensive suits, all promising reform and proper practices. They spoke eloquently about safety measures and fair wages and turning Voss's legacy into something positive. Clara listened to all of it, then asked one question that stopped them cold. What happened to the kids who died in those mines? The ones who didn't make it out? The businessmen exchanged uncomfortable glances. That's unfortunate, but do you know their names? Clara pressed. Or are they just numbers to you? Statistics you can bury in reports and forget about? Young lady, we understand you're emotional, but I'm not emotional. I'm practical. You want to buy these mines and profit from them? Fine. But first, I want memorials, markers for every child who died there, with names, and I want families compensated, and I want you to fund an organization that helps other kids escape situations like that. If you can do those things, you can have the mines. If not, let them rot. The businessmen looked to Elias for support. He just shrugged. She's right. That's the deal. They argued, they protested, they tried to negotiate down, but Clara wouldn't budge, and the other children backed her up. Finally, the businessmen agreed to all the terms. After they left, Judge Thorne pulled Elias aside. That daughter of yours is something special. She's not technically my daughter yet. Adoption's still processing. Doesn't matter. She's yours, and you're raising her right. The memorial was built that fall. A simple stone wall engraved with the names of 43 children who died in Voss's mines. Some of the names came from records. Others came from testimony of survivors. A few were just listed as unknown child because nobody knew who they'd been. They held a dedication ceremony on a cold October morning. Families came from across the territory, parents who'd lost children, siblings, friends. The crowd was small but devastated, people who'd been told to move on, to forget, that their losses didn't matter. Clara gave a speech. Elias had helped her write it, but the words were hers. These names are people, she said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. Not numbers, not statistics. People who laughed and cried and hoped for better lives. They deserved to grow up. They deserved to be safe. And they weren't. But we're going to remember them, every single one. And we're going to make sure it never happens again. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Afterward, people thanked the children for speaking up, for forcing the world to remember. One woman approached Clara with tears streaming down her face. My son, Tommy, he's on that wall. Thank you for giving him a name. Thank you for making him matter. Clara hugged this stranger and cried with her, 2 people bound by grief and survival and the terrible knowledge that some things can't be fixed, only honored. That winter was easier than the last. The kids were healing, not perfectly, not completely, but visibly. The nightmares came less frequently. The panic attacks spread further apart. They were learning to be children again, slowly, in fits and starts. Noah turned 14 in December and announced he wanted to be a veterinarian when he grew up. Milo's cough finally disappeared entirely. Iris started speaking more, her voice soft but present. Lena stopped following Elias everywhere, confident enough to play independently. Eve laughed for the first time anyone could remember, a bright, surprise sound that made everyone stop and stare. And Clara, fierce, protective Clara, finally admitted she was tired of being in charge. I want to be just a kid, she told Elias one night. Not the mother, not the protector, just
Clara, is that okay? That's more than okay. That's what I've been hoping for. But if I stop watching out for everyone, who will? Me. That's my job now. You get to be 8 years old. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I, so we'll figure it out together.
The adoption was finalized on a Tuesday in February, almost 2 years after that snowstorm that changed everything. Judge Thorne handled the ceremony himself, making it official with paperwork and signatures and legal declarations that turned 6 survivors into 6 Mercers. Afterward, they rode home through light snow, and the kids were loud and chaotic and ridiculous, arguing about nothing, laughing at stupid jokes, being exactly what they should be. That night, Elias walked up to Sarah and Emma's graves one last time. The crosses were weathered now, the wood gray and splitting, the carved names barely visible. He'd need to replace them soon, but not yet. "I did it," he said quietly. "Don't know if I did it right, but I did it. 6 kids. Can you believe that? Some days I can't either." The wind answered, cold and clean. "They're good kids. Broken in ways I can't fix, but good. Noah's going to be a vet. Clara wants to be a lawyer, help other kids who get trapped like she was. The little ones, who knows what they'll be, but they'll be something. They'll matter." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I think you'd like them. I think you'd be proud of what we built here. It's not the family we had. Can't ever be that. But it's a family, and that's enough." He stood there until the cold drove him back down to the house, where lights glowed warm in every window and 6 voices called out to ask where he'd been. Years passed. The kids grew. Noah graduated from the Territorial Veterinary College and came back to open a practice near the ranch. Claire studied law and became the youngest woman admitted to the territorial bar, specializing in child welfare cases. Milo became a doctor focused on treating lung diseases from mining operations. Iris never spoke much, but her artwork became famous across the territory, selling for amounts that made Elias shake his head in disbelief. Lena married a teacher and had 4 kids of her own, filling her house with the same chaotic love she'd learned on the ranch. Eve became a writer, turning their story into books that traveled across the country. They scattered eventually, as children do, building their own lives. But they came home regularly, bringing spouses and babies and stories. The ranch stayed full of life and noise and love. Elias grew old watching them flourish. His hair went gray, his back got stiff, his hands developed arthritis. But he was happy in a way he'd never expected to be again. Not the easy happiness of youth, but the earned happiness of someone who'd survived loss and built something new from the wreckage. On his 65th birthday, Claire came to visit with her 2 kids in tow. They sat on the porch watching the sun set over the valley, and she said something that stayed with him.
"You know what the strangest thing is?" Clara said. "I barely remember the mines anymore. I remember they happened, I remember being there, but the details are fuzzy, like it was someone else's life. But this?" She gestured at the ranch, the mountains, the life they'd built. "This I remember perfectly, every detail, every moment." "That's how it should be," Elias said. "The bad stuff fades, the good stuff sticks." "Is that really how it works?" "That's how it works if you let it." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for everything, for saving us, for keeping us, for teaching us how to be human again. I didn't save you. You saved yourselves. I just gave you a place to land. That's saving us, Dad. That's exactly what saving us looks like." Elias died on a spring morning when he was 72, surrounded by 6 grown children and 12 grandchildren, and the kind of love most people only dream about. His heart simply stopped while he was sitting in his chair reading a book, peaceful and quiet and ready. They buried him on the hill next to Sarah and Emma. All 6 kids were there, along with their families, and half the territory showed up to pay respects. The service was simple because that's what he would have wanted. Clara gave the eulogy. She stood at the grave with tears streaming down her face and said the thing that needed saying. "My father, my real father, not the one who died before I knew him, but the one who chose me, taught us that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about doing the hard work of loving people even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. He showed up for 6 kids nobody wanted, and he turned us into something that mattered. He taught us that grief doesn't have to destroy you, that trauma doesn't have to define you, that you can be broken and still build something beautiful." She paused, wiping her face.
There's a line he used to say when things got hard. He'd tell us, "You do the next right thing, just the next one, and then the next. And eventually, all those right things add up to a life worth living." That's what he did for us. Every single day. The next right thing. And now we have to do the same for him, for each other, for the people we love. The crowd dispersed slowly, but the six stayed behind, standing together at their father's grave. They were adults now, successful, accomplished, healed as much as anyone ever really heals from trauma. But in that moment, they were just six kids who'd lost the person who saved them. "He was a good man," Noah said quietly. "He was," Clara agreed, "and we're going to make sure everyone remembers that." They established the Elias Mercer Foundation a year later, funded by Clara's law practice and Noah's veterinary business, and the combined resources of six siblings who'd never forgotten where they came from. The foundation helped children escape abuse and exploitation, providing legal support, medical care, and safe housing. They saved hundreds of kids over the years, maybe thousands. And every child they helped heard the same story, about a broken rancher who found six kids in a barn during a snowstorm and chose to care instead of walking away. About how one person's decision to do the right thing created ripples that spread across generations. Because that's the thing about love and courage and choosing to help when it would be easier to ignore. It compounds. It grows. One act of kindness becomes 2, becomes 10, becomes a movement that changes the world. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through generations. They kept it exactly as Elias left it, a living monument to the idea that broken people can build beautiful things if someone just gives them a chance. And on the hill behind the house, 3 graves sat together under the pine trees. Sarah Mercer, Emma Mercer, Elias Mercer. 3 people who never got to grow old together but were reunited in the soil and stone and endless sky. Some people say the ranch is haunted, that on quiet nights you can hear children laughing, a man's deep voice telling stories, the sounds of a family being exactly what families should be, loud and messy and imperfect and full of love. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But the people who live there now, Clara's grandchildren actually, keeping the tradition alive, say the ranch feels different than other places. Safer, warmer, like the walls themselves remember what it means to be a home. And maybe that's the real moral of this whole impossible story. That homes aren't built from wood and stone. They're built from choices. From the decision to show up when you'd rather run. From the willingness to love even when loving hurts. From the courage to believe that broken things can be fixed and lost, people can be found, and that sometimes the family you need is the one you build yourself, one hard day at a time. Elias Mercer died believing he'd been the lucky one. That 6 traumatized children had saved him more than he'd saved them. And maybe he was right. Maybe that's how it works. We save each other. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Just enough to keep going. To build something that matters. To turn pain into purpose and grief into grace. And in the end, that has to be enough. Because it's all any of us have. This moment, this choice, this chance to do one right thing that might make all the difference. The storm that brought them together was brutal and violent and nearly killed them all. But it also created something that lasted long after the snow melted and the danger passed. It created a family. And families, real ones, chosen ones, the ones that matter, are stronger than any storm. That's the lesson 6 kids learned from a broken rancher on the edge of the frontier. That's what they carried forward into their own lives and passed on to their children and their children's children. Not that life is fair or easy or kind, but that even in the darkness, even in the cold, even when everything seems lost, there's still the possibility of warmth, of safety, of home. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it, and stubborn enough to hold on when everything tells you to let go. That's the story of Elias Mercer and the 6 children who changed his life. Not a fairy tale, not a perfect ending, just a true thing about how love works when you let it. How courage looks when it matters, how families form in the spaces between disaster and hope, and how sometimes the thing that almost destroys you becomes the very thing that saves you. If you have to remember one thing from all of this, remember that. Remember that your worst moment doesn't have to be your last moment, that broken people can still build beautiful things, that family is something you choose as much as something you're born into. And that when you find yourself in a storm, surrounded by darkness, facing impossible odds, sometimes the right thing to do is open the door anyway. Bring them in. Choose to care. Do the next right thing. Because you never know when 6 scared kids might become your whole world. When saying yes might save more than just them. When choosing love over fear might change everything. That's how the story ends. Not with perfection, not with easy answers, but with hope, with family, with the kind of love that survives anything because it was built from nothing and means everything. The ranch is still there if you ever want to visit. Still standing after all these years, still full of memories and ghosts and the echo of 6 children learning how to laugh again. And if you're very quiet, if you listen close enough, you might hear what they heard on those long winter nights by the fire, a man's voice telling them they matter, that they're safe, that they're home, and that they always will be.